welcome to this school committee meeting, January 19th. We are going to begin our open session agenda with administrative business, the consent agenda. Would someone like to move the consent agenda? Thank you, Suzanne. Is there a second? Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, your vote? Mariah? Andy?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Helen?
Can I abstain on the minutes and approve the rest?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. That's what I
Nancy?
did.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So that brings us to superintendent's report. Dr. Guillory?
Good evening. Great to be here with you all this evening. We will jump right into it to give you an update on what's been happening in and around the district. So we have our agenda is to share a few PSB announcements, share some information on the school visits, as well as important dates, and then get to the highlight of the evening, the spotlight on excellence. Welcome to PSB, Dr. Grace Way. We are pleased to announce the appointment of Dr. Grace Way as the interim deputy superintendent of teaching and learning. Dr. Way brings a deep experience and knowledge about teaching and learning and leadership after 33 years in education. Dr. Way previously served in the Boston Public Schools as a regional superintendent. And again, this is a replacement for the position previously held by Deputy Superintendent Leslie Ryan Miller. The position is currently posted, and we are receiving applicants now, and our goal is to, by mid-March, have a deputy superintendent identified for July 23 start. In the meantime, please help me welcome Dr. Grace Way. New name for the BHS student newspaper. The Brookline High School student-run newspaper, formerly known as the Sagamore, announced on Wednesday, January 18th, that they will change its name out of respect for Indigenous people who use the word. The Sagamore, and this is again research done by the newspaper staff, Sagamore references the Indigenous term Sagamore, which denotes a leader of some New England Indigenous tribes, including the Massachusetts tribe of Punkapaag. Newspaper staff concluded that usage of the name perpetuates a history of misrepresentation and appropriation of Indigenous peoples and serves as a reminder of the erasure of their cultures. The newspaper will select a name through a town-wide contest where community members can submit name suggestions. The suggestion form can be found on the newspaper site, still at the sagonline.com. So the newspaper staff have communicated that out to the community at large. We continue to monitor the positive COVID cases within the community over the past few weeks. So from December 30th through January 5th, we had 52 cases reported across the organization. And from the 6th through the 12th, we had 27 cases. And back up this week, from the 13th through the 19th, of 39 cases. We continue to host COVID-19 and flu vaccinations clinics, and the next one will be held at Baker School on Monday, January 30th. And remember that we are a mask-friendly environment and certainly encourage all those wanting to wear their masks. Statement on hateful messaging. I think in recent weeks, we have experienced some acts of hatred in members of our community. So we want to firmly stand against all acts of hatred and all forms of isms that include but are not limited to racism, sexism, ageism, ableism, classism, colorism, ethnocentrism in our district community, in our local community, and across our nation and globe. We unequivocally condemn the divisive forces of hate, inequities, and injustice against all persons, families, and communities. This includes all acts of bias, disrespect, discrimination, verbal and physical abuse, harassment, threats, defacing of property, and the creation of environments of fear against any person, group, community, or population. It takes all of us to keep our community a place safe from such hateful messaging. We encourage you to refrain from giving your time or attention to these examples of antiquated and uninformed beliefs. Instead, please take a moment to celebrate our diverse student body and community. And that's all I'll say on that, but we are standing against all acts of hate and discrimination in the public schools of Brookline. For a building projects update, Driscoll School is moving along very nicely. Glass is currently being installed as well as window frames and drywall. The building is expected to be tight by March of 2023, which means that all windows, doors, and walls will be sealed at that time. We also want to acknowledge, and there were also some change orders that occurred at the recent select board meeting where I believe a change order was approved for terrazzo flooring for the Driscoll building. Also at that same select board, they unanimously voted to authorize the use of former Newberry College as swing space for the Pierce School. Should that need arise, we anticipate Pierce 6th through 8th grade relocating during that time, and we've been asked to engage in a MOA or an MOU that allows us to use it for a finite period of time. And so we want to update the community on those two. Superintendent school visits had an exciting week visiting both Pierce and Driscoll. Pierce was the guest reader for their MLK celebration for grades K through 8 participated, but the K through 5th grade students participated in the program with their singing and citations and such. And then I had the opportunity to visit Driscoll today for their Lunar New Year celebration. So that was quite exciting. And it was the first time, I think, in 3 years that the students were able to participate in this. So my recently completed visits are Beep, BHS, Pierce, Heath, Driscoll, and Lincoln, and upcoming are both Lawrence and Runkle. So again, in each of these, just for folks that are new to watching this, at each of these sites, I've spent time with the building principals, over the course of the year, and what work they're engaged in, and offering them feedback and suggestions for continued growth and improvement. And oftentimes we visit classrooms as well as other activities around the building. I also had the opportunity to visit Ruffin Ridley, PTO, their monthly meeting for this week, for this month, I'm sorry. And then earlier today also we met with all of the PTO leaders in the district as well and shared with them some important information on the budget. Lunar New Year is Sunday, January 22nd. Happy New Year to all. Quarter 2 term ends for 6th through 12th grade Friday, January 27th. And our International Holocaust Remembrance Day is Friday, January 27th. And with this, we will turn our spotlight on excellence to the Lawrence School, the 8th grade Partners Program. We're pleased to have Lawrence with us this evening as we shine the spotlight on excellence on their Grade 8 Partners Program. Principal Crowley and several 8th grade students will tell us a bit about this program, which offers 8th graders the opportunity to serve the school community during their advisory period. All 8th graders participate, selecting an activity that interests them, such as recycling, assisting in PE, or reading to younger students. Therefore, all 8th graders do their part to make Lawrence School a caring and just community. It is my pleasure to turn the microphone over to Principal Crowley and the 8th grade student representatives from Lawrence School.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory. So nice to be here. Thank you, school committee members, for having us here tonight. I'm very excited to be able to present some of amazing 8th graders that we have at the Lawrence School. We have a wonderful 8th grade class this year, and any of the 8th grade students could be here tonight to present. And you're lucky to meet 4 wonderful students tonight. Like Dr. Guillory said, we call this our partners program. And this is actually the brainchild of our grades 7 and 8 social studies teacher, Kate Hollander. Kate was going to be with us tonight. However, she's not feeling well. So I just want to make sure that people know that she wanted to be here with all of her students. So you will hear some wonderful activities that our 8th graders engage in to help out the younger students. And of course, they are engaging in these activities as they try to continue to model how to be a really great Lawrence student, how to be a really great Lawrence citizen, and just how to be a good friend. So without any further ado, I will say to my 4 students, you guys are going to be off. You're going to be great. You practice this afternoon and you're going to do a wonderful job. So you've got this, and Lawrence loyalty to the 4 of you that are out there tonight. Let's start off with Isaac.
Hi, my name is Isaac Bonfim, and I worked with both kindergarten classes, KC and KG, during their lunch period. During that time, I would help them with their lunches, like opening their food, or helping them like open their food containers or anything, and throwing away their trash. Some of the things I did was help them clean up, and during that time, I also had some fun talking to them, learning how kindergarten has changed, and how they felt this year. We also played some games like rock, paper, scissors, shoe, and some of them told me some jokes that they made up, and it was a pretty fun time.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. And now you'll hear from Ibrahim and Corinne, because they worked in the same classroom together. So you'll hear their perspectives. Ibrahim, why don't you start?
Hi, I'm Ibrahim Abdeldayem, and I helped in 5N during the students' reading and writing period. I helped the students with any questions they had about their work and just helped them stay generally engaged with the class. I really enjoyed it because I remember what it was like to be in 5th grade, and I could easily relate to them. Corinne was also helping in 5N if she wants to share.
I'm Corinne Bueno, and I also helped with 5N, and I helped Mark there.
I don't think they can, we can't hear you, Corinne. And I'd like to,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, maybe just lean in towards your computer a little bit, Corinne.
Can you hear me? Okay. I helped with 5N too. I helped like mark their spelling tests, and I helped them with like any other words they couldn't spell. And we made these like labels together for their book bins. So it was really fun for me to connect with the lower grades.
Thanks, Corinne. And now we're going to hear from Hayden.
Hi, I'm Hayden Park, and I worked with a kindergarten class called KE during their music session, and I mostly helped pass down instruments and sit with other students, but I mostly sat down with the kid who couldn't kind of control himself in sitting, so I sat with him and talked with him, and it was a lot of fun, and we learned a lot about each other. So I thought that was a great opportunity.
Thank you, Hayden, and thank you to all of our students. Some other examples that you would see some kids doing around the school might be helping out in the art room, helping out during PE classes. Actually, there's a small group that engaged in recycling. So each week they would go around and pick up the recycling from the various classrooms. Every year, the 8th grade teachers put out a Google form, and they ask all the staff around the building if they could use help from any of the 8th grade partners. So people put down all the items that they would like help with, and then the 8th grade teachers generate that list and then match up activities with students. And then they run these programs for several weeks. And this is now been in place at Lawrence for several years. We had a pause, obviously, due to COVID, but we're back strong this year. And like I said before, this 8th grade class is doing a wonderful job, and they continue to be incredible role models for our students in grades K through 7. And I appreciate them all very much. And I'm grateful that they were able to take a little time out of their evening tonight to come and join us. So once again, thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Corinne. Thank you, Ibrahim. And thank you, Hayden. You guys did a great job. And as soon as, I guess, Dr. Hillary closes this section up, you guys can pop off because I know you guys told me you have homework that you need to do. Thank you.
Do any school committee members have questions or comments? Go ahead, Nancy.
I just wanted to say, I think that you guys are doing a marvelous job. Please, please, please keep it up. My son, who's now a ninth grader, he remembers all of his mentors. We were at the Runkle School, and he remembers all of his mentors and all of the kids, the older students who helped him. It was so important to him, and they made such a difference to my son's school experience. I'm sure that all of you are doing the same. I'm so proud of you for being so generous with your time and your spirit. And I just want to say, keep it up. Thank you so much to all of you, all of you.
Mariah?
Hi, everybody. As the mom of a parent of a kid in KE, who I'm sure has enjoyed this, and as myself, a Lawrence graduate who I even remember my big buddy from when I was at Lawrence I think I was in first grade and she was a fifth grader. I think it's just so fabulous that, especially in our K-8 model, that we can have older students like you being such role models for younger students. And if I can remember it from many, many years ago, and I know it'll be very impactful on my kindergartner as well, to keep her connected with the older students in the school. So thank you. It was really great to hear about what you're doing.
Anyone
Can I
else?
second that?
Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I just want to thank you also. My two Lawrence kids still talk about their 8th grade mentors. My second grader still talks about hers also. So this is great stuff. They're going to remember this. Hi, Ibrahim.
So thank you again, Lawrence School, your 8th grade partners program. The Public Schools of Brookline Spotlight on Excellence is awarded to the Lawrence School Grade 8 Partners Program in recognition of your school-wide leadership and dedicated volunteer activities that contribute to Lawrence School being a safe, just, and caring community. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much for coming tonight and for presenting. It was very impressive. You're welcome to stay if you like, but we understand if you want to go on with your evenings.
Thank you.
So that brings us to, well, before we move on, any questions about any other part of the superintendent's report? I have one comment. Go ahead, Mariah.
I wanted to thank you, Dr. Guillory, for the, do you mind, is it possible to pull it back up, the statement against hate? If not, that's okay. I just wanted to emphasize that, strongly emphasize that among those isms, we should be including transphobia. Thank you for that statement again. It's really important.
Stephen?
Yeah, just a question about that statement. Is that going out separately to the community, or is that going out as part of the superintendent's report?
The community update.
In the community update? Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Then that brings us to presentations and discussions of current issues. Presentation of school improvement plans. And up first is Heath Principal Asa Sevelius.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to share my screen. I have 5 minutes. I want to say as well that always appreciate the opportunity. Can everyone see that? Thumbs down. Can people see the?
Asa, we can see it, but you're breaking up.
Feedback.
We could see it, but you're breaking up, Asa.
Thank you. I'm breaking. Okay. It does say my connection's unstable, so maybe someone could go before me while I stabilize. Okay, you can hear me now, Monica? Or you can go, Monica? Okay, let Monica go. Okay.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and move to Lawrence. Principal Crowley, go ahead.
Okay. I am sharing my screen as well. So again, thank you for having us tonight, and thank you for being so supportive and gracious to our Lawrence students. So I am here to share about the Lawrence School Improvement Plan. The goals that we have this year in our plan are the same as last year. So I will review them very quickly for you here. I believe the school committee members have read this already, so I'll just go through it fairly quickly. In grades K through 8, we continue our goal to increase use of data to strengthen instruction and inform decision-making for student learning and supports. And in a little bit, I will share with you some of the new updates that we are the new action steps that we're taking this year in service to that goal. Our second goal pertains to grades K through 5 and K through 8 equitable classroom practices, and then grades 6 through 8 grading for equity. All of the Lawrence goals align with the district goals, and you can see that those are there below. With regards to budgetary impact, 3 areas that I wanted to share with the school committee was our desire and the importance to continue with a Lexia site license that will have a budgetary impact. And I'm hoping
Monica, do you mind making it full screen? Because I can't read that. Like
Hold
do
on.
slideshow view?
Yep. got
Thank
it.
you so much.
No worries. I'm just gonna move the people out. Okay. So yes, one to continue with the school site license for Lexia, which we had last year, and we piloted as a school 2 years ago. Lexia has really proven to be a very strong supplement, a tool in addition to our literacy program. And one of the key benefits of the Lexia program is the amount of data that it provides for classroom teachers and special educators as they continue to inform small group instruction in the classroom. The second budgetary impact pertains to really continuing our work in conjunction with the Office of Equity and Diversity with both Janae and Hey Young. They have been amazing this year, and we want to continue that partnership with them. I'm also keenly aware that they are only 2 people who are servicing all 8 K-8 schools and the high school and BEEP. So I'm hoping that they will continue to have time for us, which they've done this year. If not, I'm trying to think of any outside agencies or institutions that we can also partner with to continue to grow our capacity to be culturally proficient educators here at the Lawrence School. And our third and final goal is to continue our work fine-tuning our grading for equity structure, which I presented to the school committee last year, and the work that we've been doing based off of our mentor text by Joe Feldman called Grading for Equity. Just a moment. Okay. So our first goal is, why do we have this goal about data? And very quickly, you can see here that it's important to use data to measure student growth. There are areas of success and areas to grow. Data can inform and guide educators' decisions about instruction and evaluate instructional effectiveness. Data can promote accountability, and data can ensure that all students learn. What are some action steps that we're taking this year? We, again, are engaged in administering the district selected SEL Universal Screener, and we are doing that again this year in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring, and you can see the dates here. One way that the staff here at the Lawrence School use this screener is that our clinical team reviews the data after all the students have taken the information, and we make sure that we create an action plan to partner an adult with every student who raised their hand indicating that they may have a problem within 2 weeks after the screener has been taken. And we've been able to meet that goal every year so far. Another area that I'm really proud is the work that our our literacy and math coaches and specialists have engaged in order to do professional development with the Lawrence staff. So this pertains to mathematics, the M-Class, the new M-Class screener, the new grades 3 through 5 spelling connections curriculum. And we've been doing a lot of work in tandem with the professional development that's been offered by the district. And that's been incredibly effective here at our school. And because of the work that the literacy coaches and specialists and our math specialists have been engaged in, the Lawrence staff feel much more supported in these new tools and these new curriculum and these new structures that have been adopted by the district. Our second goal is equitable classroom practices, and I already shared like the importance of that. It's really important for all of us to be culturally proficient so that we are able to understand the learning strengths of each of our students so that they can access the curriculum every single day. Some areas that we've been working on here, like I mentioned before, we've had a very tight partnership with both Janae Utaro and Hae-Young Ko, and they came to us and we prepared a meeting for the entire faculty in October, and we reviewed all of the district diversity and equity goals. And then, of course, we all participated in the November 8th Professional Development Day, which was just really quite informative and really resonated with a lot of staff. When we went to listen to Debbie Irving, and there of course was the 21-day challenge, which many Lawrence staff have participated in and are really still talking about that Professional Development Day. And then after that, we wanted to kind of sandwich that District PD Day. We had yet another faculty meeting that we planned with both Janae and Hae-Young, and we worked with the entire K-8 staff where we really focused on, you know, what does it mean when students are when there's a willful refusal to learn, and how do we continue to have high expectations and support students to meet those expectations. Janae and Hae-Young provided us with an article that we all read and that we discussed as an entire faculty, and then we broke into smaller groups. And we held the staff accountable by saying, how are we each accountable? And we brainstormed a list. And then what are some strategies that we're using that are effective, and what strategies can we continue to use to do an even better job at meeting the needs of all students? And then finally, our third grade is Grading for Equity. Again, this comes from the book by Joe Feldman, Grading for Equity. This is a goal that we started last year. We officially rolled out a new grading structure with all of our students in grades 6 through 8 a year ago, September. The staff engaged in about 6 months of work before that during COVID, which was just incredible that they were willing to take this on. And when I say middle school, it's all of our general educators, our special educators, our world language teachers, our PE, our art, and our EL teachers are engaging in this work. So the team met again during the summertime, and I was able to fund that both through principal money and from the MEDCO grant that the Office of Teacher and Learning told all the principals about. And I would love that work to continue because the MEDCO grant officially ended this past December, and they used that summer PD to continue identifying what areas they need to work on, and those included developing more skills-based learning progressions and really thinking about the type of feedback that they are giving to students. So that's the work that we have been doing here at the Lawrence School. I was trying to stay within my time, so I am done.
Any questions or comments? Mariah?
Thanks, Monica. I have 2 questions. One's just a clarification on the budgetary impact. This last bit that you said you funded from the MEDCO grant.
Right.
You want to keep doing it. Is that the third bullet on the budgetary impact about the middle school staff, the Grading for Equity? That's the same profession. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that properly.
Yep.
And then my next question is not really for you, but I'm going to use your presentation as a springboard. And it's a semi-repeat of my question from our last group of school improvement plans, which is, it's about the Lexia license. So my first bit of this is, I wasn't really clear right now, do you have the Lexia license or not?
Right now, I believe all schools do because it was funded by OTL. So the answer is yes.
Okay. And so then this is my question that I think is really to Linus, which is, how does this pilot, the results of this pilot, get shared, not only what's happening at Lawrence, but what's happening at all the schools? And not just necessarily about this one, but before and after, so that they're not, so that 2 groups, I know you said principals are talking, but is there anywhere where people are saying, hey, I'm doing this pilot both before and after, so people don't accidentally duplicate pilots of any kind? Like, do they talk about them in advance of them, or only the results of what they've learned from them?
I think it's a great question, and there are several ways to attack it. I think especially with these These types of expenditures run through teaching and learning, so that office has that insight as to who's doing those types of things. But I think also from the budgetary side of the house is making sure that we're not overly duplicating efforts as well.
Which ties in perfectly to my part B of this, which is several years ago, and it's probably more than several, but maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a big plan to look at all the software platforms and the different educational databases and so forth, to sort of streamline those and look at the best of and sort of optimize the offering and deduplicate where we might be paying twice for what's really the same thing coming through multiple venues. And I was just wondering if that's still ongoing and active to make sure that any one of these supports is, or databases that we're still sort of actively monitoring, given it's really easy to pare back and then accidentally things proliferate again and nobody realizes. I'm just wondering if that's an active area in the ed tech group working with OTL.
Well, I would hope so, but hope is not an answer when you're spending money. So we will definitely double check on that. I do know that Fung is very keeps a close eye on those types of things, the CIO, but then also just making sure that we are trying to be streamlined. But I know the OTL group takes a hard look at those items.
Okay, because I know at one point it was Scott's responsibility, Scott Moore, through ed tech and libraries.
Yeah.
And they're so expensive and it's so easy to all of a sudden have 10 different things doing almost the same thing. So
Thank you, Monica. I think Monica had something to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Linus said. With regards to Lexio, when we piloted it 2 years ago, it was a very careful discussion with Leslie Ryan Miller and the other OTL staff about why do you want to use it? Why do you want to use this program? What data are you going to collect? And then we actually had the pilot, and then I met with them and talked about the results. And then I met with all the principals at our principal meeting, talked about Lexia. And then the question was, do other schools want to have the license? And there was a lot of conversation and talk, and with Scott Moore, about what would it cost to get a district license versus a school site license and all of that. So they really went through that process very, very carefully for the Lexia license. I remember that very clearly.
And I'll just jump in and confirm that Scott is working collaboratively with the IT department to make sure we do that for any number of software licenses.
Helen?
Sorry, thank you for the presentation, but I'm curious, how much is the Lexia license for the district or for a single school? Do we know?
I want to say that a school, actually, I don't want to say because I don't have the correct information and I don't want to say the numbers. I don't.
And Gabe, you don't know. Okay, if somebody could find out for us,
Yep.
just so we know.
Helen, I just want to say that in signing the warrant every week, I see a lot of different subscriptions coming through, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. I think it's wonderful that we have this diversity of resources, but some of them are very expensive. Some of them are very cheap. It's amazing to me how cheap they are. I think this week I signed a New York Times subscription for students for $800, I believe, for the year, which was that was a great deal, I thought, for all of our students to have New York Times. Nonetheless, some of them are really expensive. So it's great to hear what you said, Monica, and what you affirmed, Gabe, about the ongoing monitoring of these. Thanks.
Just as a quick confirmation, it's approximately $100,000 for the district.
For the
So that's
whole
all-
district.
Yeah,
And
whole
that's
district.
to be able to put almost.
Just for
all-
Lexia, not for all of the subscriptions, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I get that, but it's for all data that any school would want to put into it?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Thank you for
Nancy?
finding that out.
I'm going to piggyback on Mariah's question. Oh, first of all, Monica, that was great. Thank you so much. I think this is probably for you too, Gabe. First of all, hi, Gabe. The data, is the data shared back? Forgive me if I'm not as familiar with Lexia. Is the data shared back and reflected and collaborated with the teachers who are and staff who are administering it? And then is that data sort of shared across the district? I think Mariah asked this question. I'm going to ask it a slightly different way. In that, instead of sharing just raw data, is the data sort of spliced, compiled, and then shared across the district in a very sort of concise, productive way?
I don't believe it was shared in a district capacity. I will say again, when I had the conversation with Leslie and OTL back in the day, part of the conversation was, how are you going to use the data? How are you going to train the staff? So our literacy coach, our K2 coach, Jill Dempsey, really became familiar with the program, took a little tutorial, actually a few of them, and then she provided professional development for all of our staff here who were going to use the license. And actually we dedicated some faculty meetings and Friday collaborative times to go through all the student data and try to figure out how do they use that to inform instruction. So it was vetted very carefully here at the school, but that was part of the promise that I made when we started the program. I don't think we've done like a cross section of all the schools who have used Lexia, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I can confirm that. And generally speaking, we're prioritizing the M-Class and DIBELS screener for our district-wide literacy work.
Mhm.
Well, this is terrific. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys, for your hard work.
Suzanne? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Stephen.
Two things. One, I just want to note that there are actually a number of literacy-related indicators in SIPs. That Lawrence has got the only one relating to Lexia, and for 2 years running. But there was also an M-Class one, I think, in Runkle, and I think Heath has got one for OG and for Wilson programs too. So there seems like there's a lot of data being collected and analyzed around literacy programming. So it would be really interesting to see all of that aggregated and analyzed as one, since there's so much being collected. But my question for you, Monica, is around the third goal of equity in grading. So I know that that's been a goal for Lawrence 2 years running. I'm just wondering if is that goal nearing completion? Is that goal going to be transitioning into a different equity related goal, or do you see Lawrence sticking with that specific goal for some longer period of time?
A great question. I see that goal and maybe the other goals as well continuing at least through the 23-24 school year. I think many people have heard the expression that it takes at least 3 to 5 years for a school to really learn a new process and have it embedded into the environment of the school. We just rolled it out with families and students a year ago, September. And the teachers are still working on creating rubrics and learning progressions for all their units and all their lessons. And that is going to take a fair amount of time. I mean, we have faculty meetings and we have some collaborative time, but it takes teachers a lot of time. And that's why they engage in this work during the summer hours. So I would like it to continue. I hope it continues because we're seeing really positive results in student self-confidence, student self-esteem, students' capacity to understand what skills they're actually learning and they're supposed to be mastering. So I would like to see it continue for at least the 23-24 school year, if not a little bit further.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Suzanne?
Actually, that was somewhat of my question, Monica. Thank you for the presentation today. And I was just wondering, after almost a year and a half now of working on grading for equity, what might be an aha that you've learned and something you're doing differently in your practice at the school based on this?
Yeah, no, we just had in fact, all of this information was shared with our school council last week and again at our PTO principal forum last night. And during the presentation for grading for equity, we talked about the teacher aha moment, and the teachers are talking about they feel they have a more intentional understanding of the exact skills that they're teaching for every lesson and every unit. And they have those, written out and explained in all of the rubrics that they've currently created. The aha moment for students is that they understand what they're learning and why. I now walk into classrooms and the first thing I always say is, what are you working on? Why are you working on it? What are you learning? And in the past, I mean, some kids could tell me, but not all kids could tell me. Now, our students in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th are saying things to me, well, Mrs. Crowley, I'm trying to become more proficient in this skill. And like, well, how do you know that? They're like, here, come look at the rubric. And then they take me through the rubric. And then they take me through the feedback that the teachers have given them. And in addition to that, they understand, we're trying to get them to better understand the importance of practice work is going to impact how you perform in demonstrating your proficiency of a skill. So between the teacher aha moment and the student aha moment, it's feeling very positive. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from students and families. There has been feedback from some students who struggle because they just want to get the A, and that's what we're trying to get them away from. We're just trying to get them away from the grade and talk more about like, what do I need to do to learn this skill?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe we can have you come to curriculum subcommittee and do a deeper dive. It's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening and for that presentation. Very much appreciate it. So next up, we'll try Heath again with Principal Sebelius.
Right, Heath is here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. I had to shut down the Super Smash Bros. Competition happening upstairs. So now that the Nintendo Switch is off, I think we're all set. So thank you, thank you. First of all, I want to say that, of course, this plan, we have 5 minutes really to dig in and then afford time for your questions. So this presentation I'll send to my community in our community notes tomorrow, and then it'll be on our website as well. So I invite, and of course you have it in your packets, I believe, but just invite people watching to tune in those other ways if they really want to dig in or just call and ask questions. And then I also want to just say what a kinship I feel with the work that Monica's doing. And I think as we go through my presentation, you're going to see these alignments, and you've already made the connections to Runkle, which for me as a principal, when I first interviewed here, one of the questions I asked during my third or fourth interview was, how did the schools align? And there were a lot of chuckles in the room. That was, several superintendents ago. But now looking at all of this and knowing my colleagues and how closely we work together, I just feel that alignment, and that feels really good because we're singing in the same hymnal. Sometimes different songs, but at least the hymnal's the same. So it feels really great. All right, let's do this. So first of all, I always like to remind folks of our North Star. We've had this in place for a few years and it still really resonates. So when children and teachers feel happy, safe, and supported, we have room to grow and learn through collaboration and risk-taking with our peers. And I hope that continues to resonate through the presentation. The plan we have in place right now is a 3-year plan. We launched it last year. We'll be moving along with it until the spring of 2024. That's when we'll start to create our new 3-year plan. 3 years, like Monica said, 5 years is when it feels like, things are really starting to change. But sometimes I feel like I don't have 5 years. And so 3 years feels like a really tidy period of time where I feel like I can start to get some traction on stuff. And again, the objective that we have that really serves the entire one, school community, and two, the plans that we put in place is this objective that every student in our care really feels like they have access. They have access to the school psychically, physically, academically. They feel like they're a member in the community and that they fully participate. So you'll see that in the thread as well. We have a lot going on, just like the other schools: investigations, Desmos and math, the M-Class, Heggerty, phonemic awareness, the spelling connections, decodable texts. Those did not impact our budget, but we are really feeling flooded and very supported in the implementation of these new programs in math and literacy. We also have a new rollout in our 3rd grade science curriculum, and felt very supported in that as well. SEED is a district-wide initiative, and this year we were able to train 2 teachers and launch a SEED program. SEED is a nationwide, decades-old program around seeking educational equity and diversity. I'm a member of the administrative SEED cohort this year as well. And then the social emotional learning this year, we've been doing these universal screeners with students to find out where they are, who they're connected with. Do they feel trusted themselves? Do they have trusted relationships? Are they in relationship with the trusting adults? And so this year in the fall, we launched our K2 screener. So now K through 8, we're getting that really intense social emotional data on our kids and taking a really deep look at it. Our guidance counselor, Dave Chayad, in fact, wrote down a thank you letter to every teacher who was named as a trusted adult and hand delivered these piles of papers all around the school. So teachers and myself and all the staff really felt like their work was having an impact. And then in 6th grade, we're piloting the Wayfinder program in advisory. We do have advisory in 6th grade, not 7th and 8th, but we didn't have a program. We were making it up as we went along. So along with Matt Dubois and the guidance department in the district, we're piloting Wayfinder, which is, starting to get some traction on that. It's a new program for us. And then none of those have budget implications on our direct budget. Of course, in the district they do. But the thing where I have spent any money I have really this year, it was a Metco grant, it was workshop money I have, has really been around student affinity groups, some professional speakers and professional development, but mostly around stipends for faculty members around student affinity groups. And we can talk about that more if you'd like later. So our goal, our first school improvement goal, is every student can advocate for and access what they need. Here again is that text I invite you to read later, just for time's sake, but I'll tell you how we're really activating around some of the ways. It's really hard to design a presentation when the work of running a school or being in a school or teaching in a school is really chaotic. So how do you refine a presentation that really spells out a few things to the right people at the right time? So here's how we're activating in some ways. Again, conducting those universal screeners K through 8. Conducting is one thing, poring over the data, listening to students, reconnecting with students, identifying the strengths in our professional practice, identifying the strengths in the social emotional practices kids are bringing to the table. That's really the work that we're activating on, and the indications of progress you'll see in the right-hand side over here. Those are the indications of progress we're looking for. We are running a lot of different programming in our classrooms to support student social emotional development, what we believe will then activate students to advocate and get what they need. So zones of regulation, second step in grades K and 4 and some 5 classrooms, 5th grade classrooms, still really running the restorative justice circles and practices, again, that wayfinder and advisory, really examining and looking at our pro-social classroom practices, particularly in the early childhood grades, K1, 2, and 3, and how can we adapt those for middle school so that we're singing, again, all of us from the same hymnal as much as possible. And then we're still really a very strong partner with our child assault prevention, the CAP program. And we've been running that program for a really long time and encourage other schools to look into it as well. And so really it is fidelity of implementation. These are practices that we're adopting or things that we're adapting. And so we're just looking at the implementation. And again, what's the data that we get anecdotal and real time in classes? Our student affinity groups, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because that was a spotlight on excellence a few months ago. Our students presented very passionately. And then again, the BHS recommendation process, we, the teachers and the staff, the administration, the guidance team do not make student recommendations for the high school. We encourage our students and parents in a collaborative manner through a lot of support to make decisions for themselves. Our teachers feel very strongly that we can guide, we can support, we can answer questions, but the decision on what track or what pathway you're going to follow in the high school really is something that has a deep and lasting lifelong impact, and we are simply partners. We are not the absolute ultimate decision makers. We do not reign supreme in that area. And so our work with teachers and parents is really strong in that area and will continue to be so. Our next goal is a positive increase in student data returns, particularly for students with disabilities and our BIPOC students. Those tend to be, of course, the areas in which we do our have the most struggle with kind of lifting the performance. And we're really taking a strong look at our practices, not just kind of our anti-racist, anti-bias practices, but also what are the academic processes in place to support all children. How do we know they're working, and when do we know when they're not? And so some of the ways we're activating here, we do have a RISE cluster in our school. RISE is a program specifically designed to serve all kinds of learners, but specifically designed to really meet the needs of children with severe autism. And so our goal around that is inclusion. How do we know that, one, they're meeting their goals? Well, we have programming that allows us to tap into that, but the inclusion part, that's certainly more amorphous. Are these students who, again, have significant needs truly having that full access and membership to the school? How do we know? What are the opportunities, and what are some of the returns on that, including, invites to birthday parties, right? Our students with severe autism might not be the first ones to get invites to birthday parties. And so we're trying to message and coach families of, students who are not as neurodiverse on how to invite and accept and prepare. Again, we have a seed class that we've launched for our staff. I think there's 8 staff or so and 2 professionally trained leaders at the school. So we're embedding that work in our space. Literacy and math, like I spoke about, we are launching all kinds of programs with Fidelity. We're working really hard at that. And the great thing is our teachers are really hungry for these supports, and they are activated. We're in conversation, we're in professional development, we're looking at data in a lot of different settings, independently, in our weekly consults, in special ed consults, when a child is brought to the child study team. We are data rich, and especially in early child literacy, and then math across the grades. In addition, we are also looking at, we also run all kinds of, very specific programming in our special ed departments around lively letters, the ACE curriculum in our, which is an ABA curriculum designed for students with autism, Orton Gillingham, Wilson, Sing Stars. I know that there was a question earlier about, how do we know that data? I mean, that data you're really funneling down to like really fine level. So you might be looking at 3 kids rather than 30 kids in a grade. But we are definitely looking at all that data and turning it around in our decision making. And then, of course, data review for MCAS data. And this year in the fall, once we had all of our data and we had like this rich kind of, trove of data that came in, I sat for a whole day with the literacy and math specialist, my vice principal, our team facilitator, the EL teacher, and we really just dug in. We said, where have we hit our targets? Where, and great, move on. But what are the things that really surprised us in the data? And where did we fail, right? Not only against the state, but against ourselves, certainly against, the district, the state, but ourselves. We are the ultimate kind of marker. We've typically done well in MCAS. And so where did we fall apart? And then specifically for English learners or emerging bilingual students with IEPs, and then around race categories, and really staring, that hard work and what we need to do in the face, and then messaging it broadly. The third goal, continuing to implement cycles of professional learning during faculty meetings. And this is, I think, where you're going to hear that overlap with Runkle, not Runkle, but Lawrence, and also Lincoln School. I'm sure you'll hear about it when Brian presents. Our faculty meetings are specifically, most of them are being used around faculty book groups. I create the agendas. Staff participate together. I step out. I allow them a lot of, space just to talk amongst themselves in small groups. In kindergarten through 5th grade, they're doing the book Start Here, Start Now by an educator, Liz Kleinrock. And then in 6th through 8, we are doing also the grading for equity work. And we are in our first year. Monica's in year 2. Brian, I think, is in year 2, or I'm in year 1. And I will give you an anecdotal data now, because I think you might ask, is after one session, really with some of the 8th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers, a couple of them came forward to me because it was time also for them to make their professional goals for the year. And they said, we want to make goals around grading for equity. We just want to change our practice right away. I said, well, okay. Not achievable. And so let's scale it back, but they wanted to do like cross grade. They wanted to do, across content areas, but they wanted to activate quickly because what they were reading and digging into was really hitting kind of their professional buttons, and they wanted to activate. So slowing down, because the first thing we need to do is learn, and then we activate. I think so often people want to activate right away because they see the problem, but you can't activate in a really authentic, genuine, smart way unless you have done deep learning. So we're really focusing on the deep learning before we start to shift practice, but the shift in practice is imminent. OTL, of course, is providing trainings for us. We have one that's coming up Tuesday around all manners of the, things that we're launching. Again, the literacy math, the science, the life cycles and traits unit. Thankful for that time. And also working closely with Janae and Hey Young around some of the, kind of the subset blocks we have in our agendas around race and equity, the same track that Monica's on. And then spending time on our new peer empowerment program. And I think this might be our next spotlight on equity when we present in the spring. But peer empowerment program is just really carving out a time in the schedule when the whole school can do the same thing all at once and everybody mixes up. I'm way over time, but all of these are, here's the data over here where we're looking at the indication for our progress and success. We do have one more goal, but I don't have anything that's really I'm monitoring right now. It's just one of those things I always want to be and aspire to is for our staff, for myself, for my team, anyone on my team to really serve as an educational ambassador to the greater PSB community. I think we're doing some really good stuff, and I want us to have the courage and the risk taking, the willingness to take risk, to pilot, try, share, present. And so that's just something that I'm always encouraging everyone to do. and it's something that we want our kids to do as well. And then finally, I do want to remind the committee here tonight that we are in the process of changing the name of our school. And here and on our website, we have our mission statement. We are working really hard. There are active updates on the website. There are active updates we're trying to message, and I encourage you to ask questions when the time is right. I believe I'll be presenting soon, maybe in February, to you all as well. And other than that, I just encourage you to join us, ask questions, contact me so that I can, walk you through where we're at in the process. Other than that, thank you, and I'll take your questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Any questions? Go ahead, Stephen.
Thanks for that great presentation, Principal Sebelius. Just a couple of quick comments and then a question. One, I just want to note, for the second year in a row, it seems like everyone is calling out Janae in your office in Haeyoung for their contribution to the SIPs. And I just want to note again how unlikely it is that a small office can be making such a substantive contribution to all these SIPs. So just want to note that for everyone listening, that this is continuing to happen. So thank you, Janae, for all the work that you're clearly doing with all the principals. Two, I just want to call out your second goal. I think it's really commendable that you're looking to disaggregate student achievement by demographics. I think that's pretty courageous, and I think it's really courageous that you included MCAS data in there, which is, as you know, an area where our district is really struggling. So that leads me to my question, and it's for the principals, but also for you, Dr. Guillory. What's stopping us from putting hard numerical targets in our SIPs? What would stop us from saying, for instance, that our target over the next X years on the SIP is to close the gap in MCAS between the racial disparity gap by X% as a target? Why are our indicators shying away from that? Do you advise against it, or do you think it's something that we might want to consider for the future?
Well, if I may, and if Dr. Giller, you want to jump in, but I can share my perspective, which is it's scary to do so. And it sometimes feels really lonely, to be honest with you, because again, I go back to this idea that doesn't mean we shouldn't do these things. I just want to say I want to be real when I talk about why people don't really name the data. But I think I go back to what I spoke about earlier. Schools are such chaotic environments. And so sometimes it's really difficult to have everybody row in the right direction or in the same direction or with the same oars, but it's not impossible. But I think in order to have deeply measurable goals, or just to name them, everybody would have to be doing them with their practice. It couldn't just be me sitting in an office by myself saying, okay, it's going to be 80% and we're going to meet it. Everybody has to be naming it, claiming it, and doing it. And that's the system that we have in place right now does not allow for that.
I guess I wonder then whether there's the potential to use the SIPs in a more muscular way, to judiciously and sparingly name a numerical target and then apply. We do have the opportunity to say that there are budget consequences here and there. So those could be areas where there can be a real budget consequence. And maybe these are areas where there can be a longer time horizon so that that commitment can be a more significant and longitudinal one. I guess I would love to see these plans be an engine for a deeper and more sustained change. I think the indicators that we're being presented with are rich, are interesting, are very customized per school context. But I think we also are very well aware of systemic problems we have in the district. And I wonder whether the SIPs can be an engine for driving change in the direction that we all know we want to be pulling towards anyway. And so I'm asking genuinely whether as principals you think the SIPs can be that engine. And I'm asking you too, Dr. Guillory, whether you think I'm maybe getting a little too hopeful about SIPs as that vehicle.
Again, Dr. Guillory, if I don't want to interrupt you.
Thank you, Dr. Sebelius. So I think you bring up, so Ace's point I think is spot on, and I think your questions are also spot on about this. But I think the manner in which I think Asa maybe tiptoed around sort of the way in which SIPs have been historically used in Brookline. But I think in other places, I've seen and experienced that that direction that you're describing there. So I think that's a work in progress and something that we are looking to move towards. Also, this idea of using data in a meaningful way. So to Asa's point, again, he tiptoed around this idea of data being lonely or engaging in it in a lonely way. So how to use data in such a way, because that word has been used as a weapon. It's been weaponized in such a way that people shun away from it. So how can we shift that narrative to make data a more beneficial or helpful, a helpful tool to help our schools grow as such? So
I also want to add that MCAS is a piece of data, which we value, and what the data we're getting from MClass. I'm seeing teachers right now really activated around data in ways that I haven't in a really long time. One, because these really robust data sets might not have been available, but the early literacy programming that we're putting in place and the robust nature of all the different kind of special ed programming that we're learning and being trained in, that's providing the kind of data that has real-time implications on kids, real-time implication on practice. And that I am seeing. The problem with that is we just don't see it so broadly across the district yet. So that is much more interesting to me, frankly, than MCAS data, which I get is a huge driver of who we are and how we practice and the money that comes and goes and all of those things. I'm not poo-pooing all that. I'm just saying that by the time it hits our desk, the real-time implications are less powerful in so many ways to teachers that I'm hearing from teachers than the day-by-day MClass, the Heggerty, the in-person right now data that they turn around immediately into their practice. So that is something I'm really interested in harvesting and moving forward with.
Thanks. That was really interesting. I guess I would just like to encourage people to consider the possible use of numerical targets, and not necessarily for MCAS, but for the indicators that you think would be meaningful indicators of the kind of change that you think would address meaningful systemic problems. Thanks.
And I think as we move along with this data, these new data sets, we'll be able to do that. Yeah, I'm interested.
Andy?
Yeah, thank you, David. And thank you, Asa. I always find it really inspiring to hear you present. I have a couple of questions. The first actually maybe has to do with this loneliness comment as well. Are there currently any other schools besides Heath that decline to supply tracking recommendations for 9th grade? Pierce doesn't do it? Okay.
Well, I actually don't know where every school is. We have had this conversation many times, and I think that we are the conversation that we have as principals is, it's fantastic. It was 9 years ago that Heath decided to kind of opt out and find a new path forward. I remember very clearly myself and my middle school team meeting with Jennifer Fisher Mueller, which was, feels like a long time ago, to propose a pathway forward where we did it kind of our way. And that was a first, I believe, for the K through 8s. So we just kind of said, we're not going to do it that way, but we're going to do it this way. And we've had a lot of success. So now it just kind of feels like the way we do business, but I can't speak to specifically where every school is. Anthony might be able to speak to that or, in another meeting, but that's just the way we've been doing it for almost a decade now.
Okay. My other question was, for the student affinity groups, how are you envisioning continuing to support those once the MECO grant runs out?
Well, awkward. So I'll tell you, I talked with both Janae and Hey Young, just kind of off the cuff, but that because I really do want the teachers who run these affinity groups are really pouring their heart and soul into this work, and spending so much of their time and resources and buying things also. So it would be really great if we had standardized and this would have to be, negotiated, but it really nice if we had a standardized set of these are the stipends that teachers receive for this work, so that they know up front that their time is going to be honored. We have a Rainbow Club, which is really an LGBT club, plus club for kids who are coming out at younger ages, and also just the allies. And we have 50, 60 kids show up for every meeting. But for the first year and a half, the 5 teachers doing it did it for nothing. They did it for love. And I said, this year I can get some money. I'm going to pay you. It is a pittance. I would like there to be a standardized kind of stipend rate for this kind of stuff. And so I'm interested in partnering with anybody around. What does that look like and how can that happen?
So Asa, you're saying that should be negotiated at the district level, you would hope?
Some stipends are already, like the
Right.
GSA, other stipends. And so,
Yeah, so why isn't this covered?
because these we're just doing this so fast and furious.
Okay.
Yeah, I
we're
think
just doing this so fast and furious. Gabe.
I can jump in a little bit, is that this sort of affinity group work isn't represented in any of the contractual stipends. And so we've found ways using like the workshop rate that's in the contract to compensate teachers, which is great. But to Asa's point, it's less guaranteed, right? All of the contractual stipends are guaranteed. We budget for them centrally and we can plan for them. And so, it's that distinction of the project work or the workshop rate work allows us to be nimble, but it's less confirmed.
Okay, but if we want this to be more than a pilot, we want it in the contract, right?
Exactly.
All right, noted. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, no, it's all about the contract.
Mariah?
Thank you. And thank you, Asa, for another wonderful presentation. I have 4 questions. Sorry, some of them are very short. I just wanted to reiterate what I also agreed with Dr. Guillory about your comment about muscular SIPs, and just thinking of this as a work in progress. And I wanted to reflect tonight on we went without SIPs for quite a few years. Last year was the first year we had SIPs in quite some time. The SIPs I see, I'll say the SIPs I know are multi-year, but the presentations from this year versus last year even, I found these presentations in part because they were a little bit more standardized, so it was helpful to be able to catch some of the threads across schools in a little bit of an easier way. That was really great. So I'm enthused that they're bulking up. I think that was what you said, right, Linus? They're bulking up. I think it's great, and opportunities to think about some of these things. Asa, as you said, a lot of these things we say, if I were a principal, I would be hesitant to put a number to things, not knowing if the resources are going to be there to back them. And we're just talking about one issue, right? If you were to put a number around your affinity groups and then not have funding for it, then, there's that risk. And even in a well-resourced community like Brookline, we still aren't, we have limited resources, and that's a struggle, right? Especially where we're looking at some of our most wicked problems that have been around for decades. It's really complicated to think about putting a 3-year timeline of measurable change around those. So I'm sympathetic to that. Okay, my super easy question. First, this one is easy. You mentioned the universal screener for K2. Is the universal screener now rolled out K through 8 for all the schools? Is the universal screener universal?
Well, the universal screener, we rolled it out. We might have been a part of some schools that piloted it. Again, maybe
Okay.
you can give a thumbs up if you did it or not. We were asked to do it, and I got my team on board and we got it done. They do look different because just the screener itself looks different. So K through 2 looks different than 3 through 8, but we're trying to get some overlap around the data.
Okay, but so not all the schools have K through 2 in the universal screener yet, as far as you know? Oh, Gabe, sorry, I see Gabe's hand is up.
Yeah, my hand was actually up to clarify something else, which I'll
Okay.
hold for a bit. But I think the distinction is we have K-2, the M class, like literacy and dyslexia screener at every school. We also have.
Oh, I thought this was the SEL survey.
Yeah, we also have the SEL universal screener. That is 3 through 12 at all schools.
But I thought that a couple years ago we rolled it out 3 through. We had it 9 through 12 for some time. This first year of the pandemic, second year we went 3 to 8, and then I thought that Asa, you were referring to the K to 2 portion of that.
Yes,
Okay,
we rolled
you
it
are.
out this year.
Okay, Monica, is it happening at Lawrence for K through two?
We're doing it next week, K-2 at our faculty meeting with Matt Dubois and all our K-2 staff. Yes.
Okay, so it's happening-ish. My next question is, Wayfinder for sixth grade, the pilot. Does Student Services provide the same structure for its pilots as were described by OTL for its pilots? In other words, do you get central funding? Is there a before and after, right? Is there that same sort of support structure? And will, for example, your experience with Wayfinder be, do the other schools know you're doing this? Will it be shared with them afterwards as an opportunity for them to also adopt Wayfinder or not, depending if you have a negative experience?
So I think what happens is people, and this goes back to that ambassadorship thing I was talking about. I received an email from Matt Dubois. He said, we have this resource. I asked my teachers within 10 seconds. I said, yes, because they all said, please, we'll take it. So we roll with it. We will give data back to Matt. I don't know who else actually then said, yes, we'll do it as well. It could be that some schools say, no, we're really running still with developmental designs, or we're not. We had an opening, we had a vacuum, and I jumped at the chance to have it filled. So, you know,
Okay. I would love to know, Linus, that Student Services is able to provide that same structure that OTL is in terms of these pilots, so that everyone, so that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing across the principal body. My next question is a follow-up on what Andy said. How do we move to no recommendation? It's a little bit of a not. It's not as objective as Andy's. How do we move to not having the recommendations by 8th grades at all of the schools? Crickets, virtual crickets.
Well, it's not that we haven't talked about this. We are.
Right, I believe that.
And I don't want my experience at Heath to be like, well, Heath is X and why isn't everybody else? I think people are really very seriously approaching this because we have just culled over the data around who gets placed where and why.
Exactly. There's a huge racial equity and unconscious and conscious bias happening here. And how are we sort of perpetuating systems of inequity and reinforcing kids' identities in ways where they are, this is an opportunity for them to rebrand themselves, so to speak.
Mariah,
Yeah.
I wonder whether I can just step in, and I appreciate the questions about the 8th to 9th grade recommendation process. It's actually a little bit a part of my SIP presentation.
Okay, so I'll put a hold on that one then, and we can maybe come back to it after yours.
I think
And then I
makes
just
sense.
wanted to say, Asa, one comment, which is, I love that you brought up a metric of inclusion as invitations to birthday parties. And thank you for that, because the student experience doesn't stop at 2:30. And that is one of the most acute, painful moments of a kid's life is that outside of school life as well. So thank you.
Play dates and birthday parties. Thank you. I want to go back to one thing and then I am done. I cannot, Anthony is here too, but we did have school improvement plans. I had one. I mean, if you look back in the public records, Heath School certainly did have a school improvement plan going back, for years and years and years. I just don't think it was very good. And therefore we weren't using it and talking about it. I didn't like it. It was like a snake on the road. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that, because it was just so, I wanted to design a plan, this plan. I wanted to design it that people could read it, get it, want to be a part of it. And I did too. I wanted it to speak to our mission and values in a way that made sense for people. And people would say, I can do that and I want to. And before that, I don't think we were doing that. So that was my intent with this plan. So I appreciate everybody's time tonight and thank you very much.
Well, I think you might have a few more questions coming your way. But one I have that's related also to the BHS recommendation process is specific to the alumni panels that you mentioned. I'm just curious who comprises those alumni panels. Are they recent Heath graduates or people from decades ago, a mix?
Oh, not decades ago. They are kids still at the high school. And it's, kids at a wide variety of range. A parent who is now a Heath alumni parent, Polly Rabat, she kind of said it would be great if, kids would come back. And we said, bring them on. So every year, I think for the past 4 or 5 years now, we have like 4 kids come. And they're each at kind of various states. One's at school within a school, one's, kind of, on this hyper athletic track. 4 kids with varying experiences. And they just talk about their time and really unpack it for the families, because the families in our 8th grade, it's for the families essentially, because the families are scared to death. And these kids make it real, they make it tangible, and they're so warm and welcoming. And it's just a really nice night. We crowd into the art room, and it's just a really fantastic opportunity to hear real-time feedback on one, families leave with an understanding of all the different pathways they could take at BHS, and 2, they recognize my kid's going to be okay, and 3, they're going to live. And those are the things I think parents really want to know. Is my kid going to thrive, be known, and have opportunity? And they leave feeling really great. And so we're thankful for those alum that come, and they're current high school students right now.
Thank you for that. I think that's a really excellent model. Suzanne?
I know you want to go home, Asa, you're home, you want to get live the, so my thoughts are, you don't have to answer tonight, and Monica, is for you as well. I'm just thinking, when you do your goals for your school improvement plan, do you have a part of your school budget that can address those? Do you have discretionary money that can allow you to develop goals, and that you will have the money because it's there? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yes, we have a very limited principal budget. However, with that limited amount of money, I've been very careful, and I've spent the bulk of it on providing money for teachers who want to engage in extracurriculum, that work during the summertime, getting that workshop rate that Asa referenced before. And then to buy mentor texts, I use that money, and I use the incredible gracious support of the Lawrence PTO. Could I use more money? Yes. But do I try the bulk of my money for that? Yes.
Asa, you could use more money?
Well,
of course. Yeah.
More, I'll take the time if you have more time. So time and money, those are always the impediments. But it has been very rare that I've actually come to ask for support, financial support, and have been turned away if I have a really good plan in place. And so I know that the barrel isn't, bottomless, but I feel supported when I need financial help around programming. It was this year, at the beginning of the year, after my SIP was already designed, right? We were in year 2, that we did call out, what do we need money for? And so we started that process in my site council as well. And I think everybody did that as well, really tapping into the site council's ideas and then bringing that back to Linus for our budget requests.
Yeah, I think that's great, using your site consoles. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Asa.
All right. I think Gabe's had his virtual hand up for a while. If you'd like to go ahead and comment.
Yeah, it's just one kind of point of order. A couple times we've been talking about like the METCO grant funding that was available to schools. I just want to clarify, there's no concern about the main METCO grant running out. Because we underspent and were able to roll over some funds in previous years, we did sort of a mini grant to the school's opportunity. So it's that little mini grant portion that is no longer available. We have no concerns about the main METCO grant at all.
That's good.
Thank you for that clarification. And thank you very much, Principal Sevelius, for tolerating our lengthy question and answer session. But as you can see, a lot of us are quite interested in the plan you put together, and there was a lot to unpack there. So we appreciate those clarifications and expansions.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Head of School, Anthony Meyer.
Thank you, David, and thank you, school committee members, and thank you, district leaders. I'm coming to you somewhat unexpectedly from 22 Tappan, and I'm glad to be here. So I think, go ahead, Gabe, in terms of moving slides, unless you're not in controlling the slides. So just some basic information about our school improvement plan. This is at least a 2-year plan, likely with a couple of modifications. Those of you who were school committee members last year likely remember that we had 3 goal areas. One was to examine graduation requirements, looking at the ends. What do we expect kids to know and be able to do. We also looked at student support and administrative structure, in particular, to align it with the building project and our construction, thanks to your support, of a mostly ninth grade building. And then a third area, delivery of equity content, which is work that Janae certainly led while she was at the high school. Brian Poon has done an amazing job. And Janae and Hae Young continue to support. And that is sort of our day of dialogue, day of change, day of racial reform and solidarity. So thinking about those community learning. So those were the three goal areas last year. Just basic information. At the high school, we have staff, students, and parent guardians on our school council. I think the thing, as we step into this year's goals, I want to acknowledge that we're continuing the graduation requirement work, mostly because we just didn't, with other areas of focus, didn't put as much time into that last year. And so you will see it again this year, along with what we're calling, and I think each school committee member has heard about, reimagining ninth grade, looking at beginnings. And I also want to acknowledge, I didn't catch all of the dialogue before I came on. So I heard Andy's question about 8th to 9th grade recommendations. I don't know the entire context for that, but we can certainly, Gabe and I can talk about the importance of the 8th to 9th grade recommendation process and how the reimagining 9th grade strand addresses that, I think, carefully over time. So if we want to go to the next slide. So this looks maybe more worrisome than it should be, because lots of these things are already taken care of. So they are not new budget asks. So just student support and admin structure. We worked on that last year, and we feel strongly about our caseloads and the work that we put in to make sure that each kid has 2 adults at least who know them well, a guidance counselor and a dean. And so maintaining that within current budgetary allotments. This year, we've done a couple of pilots of student support programs. So Hub Advisory, is a school-wide program born in the Innovation Fund at the high school, and then revised a few years ago. This year, we started 2 affinity groups, one for AAPI students and one for African American and Latinx students. Again, there are no budgetary asks here. This is work supported in many ways. Even Janae and Hae Young are advisors within our pilot program. Expansion of the school intervention team. This is work that is incredibly well supported by OTL. We have, our version of the child study team is really a 3-armed beast in the best way at the high school, with a data team, SEL, and then building our multi-tiered systems of support. I think the potential ask, and this is something that Gabe and I will be working with Grace and with Linus, is related to reimagining 9th grade. And as we look at our current 9th grade courses, our current leveling structures, and imagine and work towards new courses, course releases could be a budget, likely will be a budgetary ask. So we can do next slide.
Just really quickly, I want to pull back. I think you jumped over the SEL tutorial as another pilot.
Oh,
program.
thank you. Great. So I was mindful that I told Linus that I would be quick on time. But just know that the Innovation Fund has supported a new version of our tutorial program, which is General Ed, with a focus on social emotional skills and capacities, supporting kids in that way. And that's something that continues to be paid for the Innovation Fund. And we're grateful for that. we want to review our graduation requirements and pathways. Again, to know, it has been a long time, to my knowledge, since we've reviewed our graduation requirements. So certainly 10 years, probably more like 15 to 20 years. And I know Gabe was trying to track some of that history. But this is about what our expectations are for kids and whether they're in line what we think all kids should experience at the high school. So in a moment, we'll get into the monitoring, but the idea is that we would return to you a year or so from now in advance of budget as perhaps part of this process to say, this is what we would be proposing in terms of potential changes in graduation requirements. So why don't we go to monitoring, Gabe? So part of this is creating a graduation requirements team. So we were meeting with our large administrative council, which are members of Unit A, Unit B, and unaligned leaders at the high school, and working with them in sort of job-alike groups, looking at our graduation requirements and pathways, giving feedback, requesting data, and the idea is to build a team from that can work in concert with school council. We will certainly work with school council to host some of those groups. So hearing from our elective chairs and talking about what is important about our graduation requirements, what some of the obstacles can be for kids to experience, fully experience our electives, and in general, educate the school council as we think about graduation requirements. And as I think noted, we're also trying to gather data and disaggregate that data around graduation requirements earned. What does a typical student at BHS earn in terms of credits? We require just 22 total credits, and then those break out in different subject areas. And if each course is a year long, that's 1 credit. And so the average needed to meet 22 is 5.5. Many kids take 7 classes or more. And so just looking at that data and seeing what it tells us about graduation requirements. So let's go next is a bigger piece. And as I mentioned, you all have heard about this, and that is really rethinking the beginning of high school. I think we want to make sure that all kids have rigorous academic experiences and greater access to those courses. We are focused on mobility, the idea that students can move levels. And when our WISP team, our 9th grade social studies team, rebuilt that course, they found that there was a myth of mobility, that kids weren't moving from standard or college prep level into honors in the same way that we would hope or want for them. So we are in the midst of, I think, a really good process. We are very much in a good kind of messiness where Gabe and I and Leslie before are convening our 5 core academic coordinators to talk about challenges, talk about the work that they're doing in their departments, and see where we can learn from each other and push each other. And later you will hear about a pilot, and I'm sure you read about a pilot 9th grade English class that is unleveled, that is a first step towards some changes in our 9th grade courses. I think the larger piece of work, and why I'm excited about school council, some of this is academic, other pieces of it are the supports around students. So whether that's administrative and student support, whether it's our advisory program, whether it's things like tutorial and thinking about how we're using that really important resource to support kids in their 9th grade year. And just, I think the other piece, the other why that I wasn't as explicit about before is we're concerned with what Mariah and Andy said, and that is are the data of 8th to 9th grade recommendations. I would say teachers know, they know students incredibly well, and we count on them to make good recommendations. We believe they do so in an incredibly thoughtful and well-intentioned way. And, we have data that is concerning and has been concerning. And thus the idea of rethinking our 9th grade courses, thinking about unleveled options, thinking about earned honors models, where we're not asking students and teachers to decide, are you an honors student in the middle of 8th grade year? Instead, have that be process oriented and a part of conversation and the work in a course to encourage students to take on greater rigor. Gabe, go ahead with the next in terms of monitoring this. So you heard that we are meeting regularly with our coordinators, and then widening the circle to include our special education administrators, to include the administrator who oversees our tutorial program, to think about the ways in which we're supporting students in these core academic courses. I noted the English pilot that is hopefully beginning next year. And then looking at, I think for science, world language, and math, that those would be proposals that would be coming next year. World language has some complications given you've got 5 different languages, and I think the need to look at the structure of K-8 world language and how that flows into 9-12 world language. And then math certainly will take more time. And Josh has done, I think, incredible work on the culture of his department in terms of 9th grade and similar experiences across levels. And he's committed to rethinking that 9th grade geometry course. So all kids take geometry in 9th grade at Brookline High School. So I'm happy to answer some questions.
All right, any questions? Helen?
Sure. Thank you, Anthony, for your school improvement plan. I'm surprised you didn't put 3 as the NEASC, because that's going to take up a huge, I remember the last time they came through, and the amount of information they want and the amount of time that it takes is huge, and everybody should be aware of that. And you're just starting next year, right? Or you've already started?
We've already started, and I would say and I'm surprised I'm beginning a sentence in this way, but to the credit of NEASC, they've really tried to bend the process more towards schools and make it more reasonable and user-friendly. And that's how we have talked about it with our staff. So I think why it's not here as much as I didn't know how much students and families beyond participating in surveys could sink their teeth into NEASC. I think to me, the onus on NEASC is very much on administration and faculty and staff. Agreed, it is certainly an area where we're spending an awful lot of time, and also have received a really very good support from OTL and from Gabe.
I'll just piggyback on that a little bit, where as Anthony and I were talking about the SIP, we wanted to really hone in and focus on a couple goals so that we don't come back the same way where we said, oh, we couldn't make that one. And NEASC didn't really feel like a goal. It's a task that we're just going to get done.
Well, it's a goal to get accreditation, but that's just a minor detail. But actually, to correct you a bit, part of the reason that it's streamlined is because of a former social studies curriculum coordinator who became the superintendent eventually in Bedford, John Sills. He and a number of EDCO superintendents went after NEASC saying, we're not going to get accredited unless you start to make this more user-friendly and helpful. So that's part of that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. But there was a question I had and now I forgot it.
All right, well, we can
go
come
ahead,
back to
somebody
you.
else.
Nancy, go ahead.
But thank you for your presentation.
Hi, thanks for that presentation. One comment that you made just kind of jumped out at me a little bit when you said something to the effect of, "Oh, we're going to make all ninth graders take geometry." I'm assuming right now it's not required to, or it was. I don't know why that struck me, but I don't know that that's the answer. Can you just elaborate on that just a minute?
I'm sorry, I think that's not what I intended to communicate. All ninth graders take geometry in one of three levels, or at least 97% of our ninth graders take geometry at college prep or honors or advanced level. And so what I wanted to emphasize was that while pace and depth may vary across those levels, the core skills are the same across those courses. And Josh and his ninth grade team have done an incredible job in aligning those courses. I think there are still issues of who is in which courses, and that there's work to be done on our ninth grade courses across the board. Sorry about that, Nancy.
No, that's okay. I think Josh Parrish is doing a tremendous job. And Gabe, I think that reimagining ninth grade is such an important and remarkable endeavor. And I'm so glad that you and the team are taking this on, because it's really important. Gabe and I have had some conversations regarding de-leveling. That's much bigger than this presentation or this school committee meeting. I'm just looking forward to hearing about how that's progressing. And I'm just asking, how are we getting updates on reimagining ninth grade? How are we being updated as school committee?
We're happy to provide those in any way. We certainly, Gabe and I will be updating and involving Grace Way, and we are updating and involving Dr. Guillory, and we're happy to come and talk about that. I updated my PTO executive board just to let them know some of the work that was happening. And it's a long period of time, but as you're saying, Nancy, it's incredibly important how we transition the eighth graders into ninth grade and then launch them. And I would also say our curriculum coordinators have been awesome about it. We had some intense conversations in the summer into the start of the school year. And I think people are all aligned around the whys that I did a decent job of capturing here. And we're happy to share a more formal presentation when that makes sense. And we'll take the lead from Dr. Guillory on when that would be helpful for school committee and other ways that we can update.
Okay, I look forward to that presentation. Thanks.
All right, back to you, Helen.
Sorry, I remembered my question, or my actually statement somewhat. I remember voting on the present graduation requirements, and I am sure that Robin has it in this. I think we even put it into our policy handbook, the graduation requirements, so you may be able to find the date of when that happened. And I'm happy that you're re-looking at it, because it's probably time. And can I put in a pitch for my favorite graduation requirement?
Please.
CPR and swimming, knowing how to swim. I think
I agree.
It is important for us to have know that every student who graduates has those life-saving skills.
Great, thank you. And certainly CPR is part of our ninth grade health and fitness class. Swimming is not, but I think that's a good opportunity for us to think about that. And Carlin was certainly in a group talking about that today. And we'll look for the photo of you signing off on the graduation requirements with Mariah Nobrega nearby in the photo.
Thank
Stephen?
you. Touché.
Just a short question. I'm just wondering if the school council has any input into the SIP.
sorry, whether they have any input.
Yeah, into the generation of the SIP or any of its how you put this presentation together.
I think they have input in terms of what we share as goal areas, but the school council isn't generating the goals. That tends to be guided by me and by.
I'm sorry. I mean the student council, not the. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
That's my
gotcha.
fault.
No, thought you were asking a good hard question.
No, I'm asking an easier one.
No, the student government has not had input, but certainly I've talked to Jen Martin about coming to student government more frequently. You know, we have several different student government organizations. There's the legislature, which is faculty and students, or staff and students, student council, and judiciary. They have not been involved or offered input, and we have a particularly strong student government over the last few years, thanks to the incredible support of Jen Martin. So happy to get their input.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Suzanne?
Thanks, David. Thank you, Anthony. I had two thoughts or comments on. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on students taking 7 classes. Is that because there are so many wonderful classes, they just want to take them? Are they feeling pressured to take classes? 7 feels like a lot to me. And I'm just wondering, how common is that? And where is that coming from?
I think it's a good question. I think we wonder how many guardrails to put on kids and how to support families and thinking about course loads. But we have 7 blocks during the day, and if kids are taking English, math, science, social studies, and world language, you have 5 blocks.
Yeah.
Every kid wants to take an elective. And we also have a semester health and fitness requirement, at least in 9th grade. Then you get into 10th grade and there are other offerings, and kids will want to take global leadership and social justice, and it doesn't meet the social studies requirement. But then you have kids taking multiple social studies classes, meaning we have a world history requirement. And so those are social studies electives. So if anything, I would be in favor of a minimum number of courses that students should take. Just worried that there are students who are taking smaller loads than they ought to be, despite guidance from their counselor. And I worry about that. Hal, I don't know if you have more on that from your perspective as the scheduler.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Certainly we have the majority of 9th graders are taking that 7 block day, the vast majority of 9th graders. Some even take more. Some might be taking a Z block orchestra class, for example, and might be taking 7.5 or 8 blocks over the course of the year. It varies in years after that. Many kids do continue with 7 blocks scheduled. Again, it depends on what other classes they're taking along with, say, the 5 academic courses. Certainly there are kids that take fewer. There are kids that take 6, 5.5, sometimes 5. But a good majority of the kids do take 7 classes.
And sorry, Suzanne, one other thing I would mention is when a kid is taking, and this is a topic Stephen and I have spoken about, and I believe has been raised by school committee members. When a student is taking some sort of academic support class, learning center or tutorial or African American and Latino scholars, they're then using one of their blocks to get that very good support, and it hampers their ability to fully experience our elective program. So that's one of the things we want to wrestle with as part of our review of graduation requirements, review of pathways, to think about the ways that we can address some of those obstacles. Kids are getting the help that they need, and it limits how many elective courses they can take.
Yeah, thank you. So I was wondering also if we've thought any more about, if we thought of early college programs. Have we looked into that? Have we thought about it? There's additional money in the state for that. They're starting to promote it. I'm just wondering if we've taken a look.
If you mean, we have a relationship, a collaboration with BFIT, the Ben Franklin Institute of Technology, and students in our ACE program are sometimes dual enrolled, not the majority of them, but taking some classes within ACE at the high school, and then also exploring programs at BFIT. But in terms of early college, it's pretty rare, and I'd be interested in hearing more about it and looking into that further.
Yeah, there's a number of districts that are really into it. We know Salem is, and I'm not sure who some of the others are, but yeah, we can start to think about it. It's not for all students by any means, but it's certainly targeting a group of students that it might appeal to.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mariah.
Thanks, Anthony. Just a quick comment that I'm really excited about the SIP that was presented and for all the discussion about reimagining ninth grade and the question of graduation requirements and what you brought up at the end about access of students given the block system. And I think of the case of a student who, for example, may need an hour of, and I'm just giving an example, OT, 1 hour of OT a week, except then that blocks that entire block for them. And so there's not an opportunity for them in those other ways. So I'm really excited to hear about the creative thinking that's going to be going on, not just for ninth grade, but for all students to ensure equity of access and to the programs that they're really interested in. I know that my senior was incredibly excited about so many things this year. Once you get to senior year, it feels like the doors of possibility open up even wider than they were before for the classes. And so it's really, it's so great to think about how we're making sure that we're giving all kids that chance to access those programs. So thank you for a great presentation. I'm really excited.
Thank you, Mariah. And agreed. And one of the courses that you're not going to hear about tonight, because it's a course we've had, is our Asian American Studies course, which has been semester long for 4 blocks. And we're stretching it to be a year-long 2 blocks a week, which allows it to nest with other 2 block a week courses. The idea is it increases access to a course we believe strongly in, and our seniors want to take, but they feel like they can't give up the block for it, but they could give up half a block. I mean, I'm using the terms in a confusing way, I acknowledge, but essentially 2 blocks rather
I'll put it more simply. You know, in the old way of scheduling, I might have 45 kids who request that class, but in the reality, I only wind up with 15 kids that can get that class because they just can't find a way to get it in their schedule. We believe this change, A, will make the course better, and B, will make it more available to more kids within the context of the schedule we use.
Thank you very much, Head of Schoolmeyer, for that presentation. It's quite informative as always. You're all welcome to stay, but we're going to be, oh, that's right, the courses. What am I thinking here?
We have nothing to do with these courses.
Budget.
We are here. We're happy to be here.
Apologies.
Yeah, if you're going to go straight to the vote, David, that's fine.
All right. Presentation and possible vote on BHS course catalog changes.
So I'll go ahead and kind of take the lead. I think one of the clarifying questions I have for the committee, or maybe David, just for you, is kind of what level of depth, because we obviously presented to curriculum subcommittee, the coordinators were all there in depth. So I can kind of quickly summarize, or if you'd like a little bit more context, I'm happy to do that as well.
We did spend an hour and a half on this. So, and we
think
asked
just
really good questions. We asked really good questions, right? Yeah. So
I think a quick summary would be fine because we are running quite behind.
Great. So let me pull up. I have a.
And can I just say that the subcommittee voted unanimously to accept all of these courses. We did separate votes, but we did go through each one and take a vote. It's our recommendation.
And I would just say before Gabe jumps in, the curriculum subcommittee had the pleasure to hear directly from our curriculum coordinators. It is our coordinators and our teachers who deserve the lion's share of credit for these courses. So Gabe, if you want to offer a brief version, and Hal and I can chime in.
Yeah, and you all have the course descriptions, like the kind of catalog style course descriptions in your packets, I believe. Those of you in person should have a hard copy as well. So yeah, we have 4 courses, and I want to just quickly say that the coordinators and the teachers involved, and a number of these courses really are collaborations between the department head or curriculum coordinator and teachers within the department. They really have listened to students in a number of different ways, and you'll kind of see that and how the courses show up and which courses specifically are being offered. But kind of one of the main themes here is equity inclusion just as a part of regular class, right? We have the social justice class, we have racial awareness, we have data science and social justice, and we know that this work has to be part of every day, every class. You shouldn't have to take a special class for it. And this is part of what we're trying to get to with some of these in particular. Last year around this time, I want to say, APAC, which is the student AAPI group, I'm going to forget their exact acronym, made a presentation specifically talking about humanities and asking for increased representation. And so you'll see some response to that with these course proposals and the Asian American Studies course that Anthony was talking about, part of why we're trying to increase access to that class. In addition, students who identify as LGBTQ within the school, which is approximately 24% of the high school has self-identified in surveys that the school has administered, have really asked for more safe spaces and more affinity space, right? And so in addition to the course we're going to talk about, there's expansion of the GSA and support for the GSA, including a dedicated space that is looking gorgeous. And we also want to align middle school and high school programming, right? So part of that is reimagining ninth grade, but also you'll see that in a really tangible, practical way with one of the courses. So the 4 courses in performing arts, we have guitar, ukulele, and bass through songs and songwriting. So this is one where we have guitar and ukulele in our middle school conservatory program. And then there's no guitar class when kids get to the high school. So there are opportunities for kids to play guitar or bass in different options, but truly like an instructional class. And so Kenny Kozel is hoping to propose kind of a 2-leveled system, a level 1 course where students who have no experience, maybe didn't take it in middle school or are new to the high school, could jump right in, or a level 2 course. Each of these would be a semester. So one teacher could kind of teach both of them. In wellness, we want to create an integrated wellness class that is specifically targeted as an affinity space for LGBTQ identifying students. And so sort of like a number of other classes we have, like the social justice class, for example, there would be a very brief application or like interest process where students would self-identify that they want to take this class. And then we would hand schedule in and like very specifically schedule students so that we're careful about who's in the class and that the interest is there. And so that would be at a wellness elective for grades 10 through 12. In English, we have the Responding to Literature course, which is our 9th grade course, currently offered in 2 levels, and we want to pilot a unleveled version of that course. So kind of temporarily a 3rd option as we move towards what will likely be an unleveled full 9th grade class for everyone, sort of like how social studies is right now. And that team is really doing some work to align this new version of the course with the history class so that students, when they're in for example, the power unit in the social studies class, will also be reading and engaging texts related to concepts of power so that students really start to build a more aligned humanities experience in an unleveled environment. And then the 4th course is a new Asian American literature course. And so in addition to just being an Asian American literature course, which is something we have not offered, we are intending, and the English department is intending, to run this as a combined 11th and 12th grade class. And historically, the English department has only run classes for each grade. And so this would allow some flexibility and offer a more blended classroom experience, open the class potentially to some more students, and allow students who have a really targeted interest in 11th grade to have an alternate option to the standard American Lit class. So then I have some more descriptions for each one, but I'll kind of leave it there for now.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I just want to add that we did ask about budgetary impacts. That was my first question. Of course. Helen did that for us at the subcommittee meeting. And the only one that really has an impact is the wellness course, and that is going to be funded by special grants, I believe.
The Innovation
By
Fund.
the BHS Innovation Fund.
The Innovation Fund for, I think, 2 years, Carlene said, right?
It's only 1 year, but it's only
Okay.
required for 1 year. So just a quick distinction on that course is it would be taught, it would be for the first year, it would be team taught by a wellness teacher and one of the GSA leaders, the Gender Sexuality Alliance leaders, so that we could kind of skill up the wellness teacher and make sure they're appropriately addressing student needs. And then the intent is that in future years, GSA leaders would offer push-in support as part of their GSA leadership, but they wouldn't be truly team teaching after the first year.
And all the other courses would be just fill it, they would be,
Using current FTE, current staffing. And
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Mariah.
Thank you. So, so help me understand how this works. So for example, if you're adding a class, I'm just going to pick on the first one on the sheet, the guitar, ukulele, and bass. So, so are we not like, there's only so many FTEs we have. So is there something else where the sections are being reduced to accommodate this?
In all likelihood, so, and Hal, you can add, the idea is that kids are going to enter their course requests, and that is going to help us make really the real budgetary decisions beyond the incredibly important work you do. And when I say real, at the high school, we make that real by sectioning and saying, oh, there are 45 kids, that means there are two sections of this course. And so what Kenny is going to figure out is, based on how his performing arts FTE is distributed among staff, we'll see what the numbers are for guitar, ukulele, and bass and songwriting, and then determine whether to use FTE towards that or to other courses. Hal, do you concur?
Yeah, it's possible that it would come from dance FTE. It's possible it would come from drama FTE. It's also possible that we would see such a robust interest in this course that we would shift FTE from somewhere else. You know, our budgeting, as Anthony's saying, is done by requests, and we see where kids are choosing for courses. So there may be shifts here and there. And there's always, in a school as large as ours, personnel shifts that sometimes make some of these shifts necessary. For example, a teacher in one of those areas might become an associate dean next year, and therefore we have to hire somebody new to replace all or part of that FTE. And again, that all those little shifts in the case of a course like this, which might just be a 0.1 of an FTE, could come in any one of those ways. So yes, it's possible that it could replace something else. It could also just be addition to something else, and we might see that FTE come from a different area.
Thanks.
And
David.
Kenny suggested that he has within his staff people who have these skills to teach these courses.
Okay.
Like
So
cross skills, they can, yeah.
Correct.
Can I
Go
ask?
ahead.
Okay. Just so I could understand, I think Hal, you mentioned an Asian American Studies class. Is that actually the Asian American Literature class that's on our sheet, or is that a different class?
That's
They're
a
two
separate
So the Asian American Literature class is not the one that's going to 2 blocks for the full year. That's the Asian American
Correct.
Studies class.
Correct.
Which
Which is a
Asian
social
American studies we've had for probably 15 years,
Okay.
maybe more. But it is
Okay.
reinvigorating.
I just wanted to make
that
sure it
discussion.
wasn't like the wrong word being used, and I was understanding what was going on. So I like that this is a pilot of 11th and 12th grade together. Are you going to be thinking about how to, is that an opportunity again to provide additional flexibility for the department? Are you going to be looking at how other English classes could be also offered as 11th and 12th grade options?
Short answer is yes. John Andrews, the English department chair, is really excited about how the department is kind of trying to open up flexibility for English in particular, especially since students are required to take 4 years of English. Having multiple pathways could be a really exciting opportunity.
Cool. And then my last question is just terminology. It's the terminology of an unleveled pilot. And I'm just wondering why we chose unleveled versus everyone's in honors versus,
Yeah.
what that
Yeah.
means to kids, right? And what does it mean to say, hey, we believe you're all honors ready versus we believe everyone's in this nebulous unleveled, and just sort of how kids react to that expectation and so it's just a terminology question. If you could walk me through that.
Absolutely. So this was a lengthy and significant conversation within the English department. In many ways, the same way it was 4 years ago with the social studies department when they redesigned the 9th grade class. Part of the rationale a few years ago in social studies was a desire not to label kids before they walk through the door of the high school and to offer kind of an unleveled experience. And the English department, from what John has described to me, for now, especially for the pilot, wants to align themselves with the social studies class. As we see the other departments also shifting to some form of heterogeneous grouping in 9th grade, right? So mixed grouping, having a single class. We're leaving on the table the opportunity for potentially like an all honors model or an embedded honors, earned honors model. And John and the team piloting the 9th grade class also know that. So it may be unleveled for next year and it may end up shifting as we move to a full implementation. And Gary and the social studies team have said that they are also open. And so if all the other departments end up going to a different model, they're open to reimagining WISP as well, so that students have a coherent 9th grade experience, right? It's part of why Anthony described it's reimagining 9th grade in a whole bunch of ways in addition to courses and levels. But for now, the English department thought the alignment with WISP was really important.
Good. And Gabe, I think part of what you're saying also, or underneath what you're saying, is this was the progress the English department felt that they could do good work on in advance of next year to have a pilot. I think some of that earned honors model and how you're defining that work, one, it's happening within the English department now at the 10th grade level, but I think that's going to take more time and more support. And it's certainly what physics is focused on as well.
Yeah, maybe said a different way, this allows us to stop just talking about it and actually make some movement.
All right. Suzanne?
I move that we accept these additional courses for the next year.
Andy, is that a second?
I second it.
Okay. Nancy, a second. Your vote, Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
And I also vote yes.
I vote yes too.
Oh, I'm
David.
sorry, Val.
That's
Okay. Couldn't see you. All right. So that's unanimous. Thank you very much for that presentation. Now you are free to go. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much. We're super
Thank you,
excited.
everyone.
We appreciate your support. Have a good evening.
All right. So originally we were next going to have the budget presentation, but I am mindful of our public speaker who has been waiting here very patiently, and I don't want to have you need to wait another hour and a half or so. So we'll go to public comment and then to the budget presentation.
I am commenting on the budget, but I'm happy to comment ahead of it.
Well, I think it depends. I don't, sometimes, most of our public commenters, they already have prepared remarks. So if you already have something prepared that you are going to read anyway, then you're welcome to do that now. If you wanted to wait for the presentation and that's going to help inform your remarks, then that's how we'll go about it.
I think my remarks are about the enrichment in the proposed budget. I haven't seen the budget yet. I mean, I'm happy to make them regardless because I think it's going to be a working process, whether it's included or not. So it's totally up to you.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and come up, and you're welcome to go ahead.
Absolutely. This, do I have to speak into a mic or?
Yes.
Yeah, no problem. And I just wanted to thank everybody who participated so far in this meeting for their time. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Yuri Mariash. I have a daughter and a town meeting member of Precinct 17, but I have a daughter who goes to FRR. She's a second grader, and I have two more kids that are cutting their teeth in the daycare world, but will be part of the system moving forward. And I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but also other parents that have expressed interest in re-inclusion of the enrichment programs that been that as far as I know, again coming in fresh into this conversation, have been defunded or not funded a couple of years ago. And so we're in situations where, for example, I offer the principal at FRR help, through my employer. I work for Google and the people I know in the academia to help with enrichment because she doesn't have any FTEs funded to do that. We have a maker room that is standing idle, for example, because we have the space that we funded as a town. And we are responsible for this as town meeting members, as anybody else. So I am looking to help proactively engage in that conversation and represent my viewpoint that, I do see amazing things that you guys are doing with the curriculum and developing the public schools here. And I think enrichment should be part of it. And it's not a thing of privilege because, I'll use myself as an example and how I ended up in Brookline. I left the Soviet Union with my family when I was 8, I escaped and grew up in Israel. But, in the Soviet Union, everything is free, but nobody has money. So when you come to a country where is working on different principles, I grew up in poverty, hand-me-down clothes. My mom was cleaning houses. My dad was fixing vending machines. So my only ability to get exposure to, the interesting world of science, physics, biology, math was through an enrichment program in my town that although, it was poor, it's a mixed town between Jewish population, Arab population, a lot of substance abuse. I was able to kind of get distracted by something really, really enriching and very interesting. And that kind of drove me to invest more in my education, get an undergrad degree. I joined as an engineer the Israeli military, and then kind of furthered my education with a graduate degree here at MIT. But, I just want to say that enrichment is something that is so critical in helping young kids, kids that, maybe be coming from families that cannot afford it. Because, one of the comments that I heard from, one of the parents at FRR is like, look, this is public school, Brookline is full of parents that can afford enrichment outside of school, send their kids to RSM or have private tutors. But I think we're missing the point. I mean, why are we not providing that to kids? Why are we depriving them from an opportunity to explore, sciences and maybe become, the next person that saves the world, and solves the global warming problem? I just think that it's an important thing to include and to consider. And I'm more than willing to partner with you all in trying to get this through, through the budgeting process, understanding how difficult it is and how, there are competing priorities in every budget process. So thank you for your time, and I apologize if I went over the 2 minutes.
No, thank you very much. All right, next up, we have Mr. Lee Selwyn. Just 3.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Go right ahead.
Yeah. My name is Lee Selwyn. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 13. I'm also a member of the advisory committee, and I sit on the advisory committee's ad hoc subcommittee on the review of our budgeting process. I just want to briefly acquaint you with that because I think it may be helpful to you as you consider your budget. The school committee has absolute authority with respect to how it spends and how it allocates the budget that is allocated to it. But it is town meeting that decides how much that allocation will be. And what the advisory committee has been attempting to do and in developing a subcommittee to carefully examine how we do budgeting is to develop a process by which we can evaluate and prioritize the needs across all town departments, which would include the school department. And where we find that a need of one department is compelling and hasn't otherwise been addressed, we may recommend adjustments to other departments in order to compensate for any increase that would need to be provided in that situation. It will be very helpful to us if, as you go through your budget, you consider consider means of identifying your own priorities so that these can be addressed and considered to the extent that we have to consider modifying or cutting the overall school department allocation. If you do that, and I think that will facilitate our work, and it will enable us to make recommendations that provide for the best use and most efficient allocation of the town's overall budget resources. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ms. Carolyn Thal.
Hi. Sorry, I wasn't quite ready because I thought there was going to be another hour. But I'll try to read this. So I tried to read through as much as I could of the budget book that was posted today, but it's 130 pages. And I guess I just really do want to point out that it was supposed to be posted 6 days ago. And it only posted late last night or this morning. I'm sympathetic to the work that goes into this, and I know this is preliminary, but this is public process, and the whole thing about accountability is that people need to have the information. So in this case, it kind of took the ability to have the information out of the equation. From what I got through, I have a few questions and comments that I hope I'll hear addressed. Some are simple. One, what would full day BEEP cost? I see that as a potential priority. Kind of related, I'm really glad to see contemplation of using the Baldwin building, which is a terrific property. And I want to see the district shed leases as much as the next kid. That said, and I have no kids in BEEP, they're much older than that. But I would be remiss as a town meeting member representing my South Brookline neighborhood to not point out that if you move the Temple Emeth BEEP to Baldwin altogether, you take away a really centrally located neighborhood BEEP in South Brookline. And I don't know, but I think that has the potential to be upsetting to BEEP and potential BEEP families in what is my neighborhood. I love the idea of using Baldwin. It used to be, I think, a 1 through 3. I was never offended or had any problem with the idea of busing kids from the populated area of South Brookline to Baldwin, but obviously toddlers, I don't think would go on a bus. So I know that's very preliminary, but I just wanted to put that out there as a thought. 3, the conversation about recruiting and retaining underrepresented staff. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I would love to see the word men in that conversation. I think it's really important, especially in K through 8, for young boys to see more men as their teachers. And then I would sort of, in a way, echo what the gentleman Yuri said earlier. I've been in the district about 12 years. So when I came in, that was right when what I think used to be called gifted and talented was being transitioned to being called enrichment and challenge support, or ECS. At that time, ECS was transitioned from pull out to push in. So everybody got to benefit from those creative opportunities. This was the time of Sue P. and Matt Picard. They were really wonderful. And then a few years ago, ECS as a program went on the chopping block, expressed as a personnel cut. And as far as I can see, it's gone. And during this time, other personnel, some of them not student facing, have been added in. So now we see the district asking to do a maintenance of the FY23 budget into FY24, So that seems to mean that changes made in the past few years that were contemplated as temporary become seemingly permanent. So I'd really love to ask school committee, as Yuri did also, especially newer members who may not know that much about the history of those changes, to be cognizant of those changes that have been made in recent years as you talk about maintenance, because over time things can get lost forever. And I would really love to see and hear us keep articulating rigor, excellence, and those goals. So that's my initial response to the budget, and thanks everybody for your work.
Thank you. All right, so now we will move to the FY24 preliminary budget request presentation.
All righty, thank you very much. Helen or Nancy, can you let me know if the slides are moving?
Now we have a full screen. Before, when you were doing it, it wasn't a full screen. Yeah,
Yep, we're good.
I think. Yeah,
It's moving?
yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes.
All righty, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we got through the important work tonight. And here we are going to share the initial, the preliminary budget for FY24. So the topics that we plan to cover tonight are building the budget, by the numbers, the budget rationale, and then a brief crosswalk into the new budget book. So thank yous. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you given our current circumstances, as some of the comments have alluded to. I think the community is well aware that we are working short-staffed in our admin and finance office. But we want to thank Ruth Quinn Burdell, who's our financial consultant that's responsible for pulling this budget together. Certainly want to thank Mike Chan in the communications office for pulling all the parts and pieces together, as well as Kiana and the entire ANF administration and finance team, human resources, and all the budget managers who, again, adapted and worked through multiple iterations to try to get our numbers as accurate as possible, and we'll continue going through those processes. Those who've reviewed, re-reviewed, redid, and rewrote, and certainly to our building leaders, our school leaders who also pitched in and helped tremendously in this process. So I want to thank the entire team for their efforts here, and again to Mariah as the the Finance Subcommittee Chair, for her feedback and engagement in this process. So building the budget. When we take a look at the FY24, these are some art renderings from our students. Again, the concept here is to keep our students front and center. There are many times we think about budget, and certainly we recognize the financial strain that it puts on the taxpayers. But my job as superintendent is to look at what do we feel are in the best interest of our students and what their needs are, and to advocate for that through thoughtful planning as well as review. And I think you'll see some of that as we go through the budget book this evening. So our current district goals are every student achieving, every student invested in learning, every student prepared for change and for challenge, and every educator growing professionally. For our FY24 budget guidelines, it's important to also keep in mind that our budget, the school committee last year shifted to, rather than adopting budget guidelines on a year-by-year basis, we moved to a 5-year look at our budget guidelines so that we recognize that many of the bodies of work that we're looking to accomplish aren't minuscule enough to be accomplished in 1 year, but they occur over periods of time. So some of these are paraphrased and some of these are written out from our budget guidelines, but we want to ensure equitable access to curriculum and services for all students. We want to build a budget that is optimized for efficiency and sustainability, engage in the continuous improvement process through looking at academic programming, including curriculum implementation, program support, and program review. We want to continue to provide enhanced support for the social-emotional needs of our students, and certainly we want to improve the experience of a PSB employee, including employee growth through professional development and leadership opportunities. So this year, as we built our budget, we want to focus on capacity building and strategic direction. So specific actions supported in the FY24 budget request, maintaining our current excellence while implementing a strategic plan whose impact is factored into the FY25 plan or budget. We want to continue the investments made in curriculum materials and resources, continue the investment in culturally responsive teaching through continued professional development and recruitment and retention of educators of color, continued analysis and targeted investment in special education, continued mitigation and of disproportionality, continue to support the social, emotional, and academic needs of our students. We want to ensure that we are continuing to innovate in our instructional practices, as well as engage in ongoing program reviews. And I think this was what one of the public commenters shared earlier, is this idea of how do we look at the programs that have been added over multiple years. We as educators tend to add, and the concept is, well, what else are we going to take off our plate in that stead? And we have to engage in a process to actually look at that and recognize that there are going to be choices that are made that some are going to feel that need to stay. But in a land of finite resources and finite amount of time, we do have to make those hard choices, and we are engaging in that process. We want to maximize our operational and financial efficiencies, and at present, the FY24 budget, as it's presently presented, is not including any new initiatives. FY24 by the numbers. So many of you are familiar with the Town Partnership, which is a formula that's used to split the town revenues between school department and the rest of the town. So when this formula was initially implemented, it operated on a sort of I think a 50-50 scale, something to that degree, but has evolved over time and is now operating at roughly a 60-40 split. 60% is allocated to schools and 40% are allocated to the town departments.
Linus, can I just interrupt you and
Sure.
say that that's a little bit of an oversimplification, and we don't, and people should understand that that's just on the increment
Yep.
of the new funds. That's not necessarily historically on where it goes. And while it was 50-50, there were adjustments that historically would make it 60-40 anyway. So just to put that in the record.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. So when we look at FY23, I don't think I have a pointer, and I don't think people could see it if I did point. The FY23 school allocation from the town was roughly $125.6 million. And when we look at the FY24 initial allocation from the town, we're looking at $127.3 million. So as of 12/15, the town allocation is $127,323,182. And at this moment, the superintendent's recommended budget is $131,864,685. And we want to also point out that this recommendation at this point is reduced and refined from the town's long-range financial plan, which had a rough estimate of $134 million initially for FY24. So right now, we are looking at a difference in what our town allocation is and what the ask is to operate the district at its current capacity of $4.5 million or $4,541. $4,541,503. That's what happens when you wake up at 3 in the morning and you think it's Saturday already. This is where we presently stand. And when we look at some key takeaways, so when we look at our budget over time, the orange number that you see there represents the town allocations, and then in FY24, that's the superintendent's ask. So in FY21, our actual amount was $120.7 million, our actual appropriation. In FY22, that actual appropriation was $121.1 million. And then in FY23, our projected actual allocation is 125.6, and that was after an update at the November town meeting. And right now we are at $127.3 million from the town as its initial allocation. Some key takeaways here is that the FY24 budget grows at, the total budget grows at 1.2% compared to FY23. So when you look at our projected FY23 number, that number is 148, I think that's 0.3. So what it says, the FY23 total, 148.3.
I can't read that far away.
And then, okay, and then the FY24 is looking at a final projected number of 150.1. So when you compare those two numbers, our overall difference in budget is 1.2%. But where does that shift happen? So when we look at our loss of pandemic funds, which have sustained PSB for several years, to the tune of $5.6 million in FY23, that contributes to the shift from grants, what's represented in the purple graphs, purple sections of the bar graph, to the PSB request, which is in the orange for FY24, results in the $4.5 million deficit between the requested budget and the current town allocation. And we also want to acknowledge that there's $1 million difference shifted for 1 year to the BEEP revolver that also helps mitigate these costs. So when we start talking about—
Linus,
Sure.
I'm just wondering if we want to pause for questions on this one, because this is a really important slide for people to understand.
I wanted to do the same. That's a huge point. So that's a 1.2% growth of the total budget, despite a loss of $6 million in federal funds, which is a huge amount when you're looking at that blue piece up top.
But I think it's important to understand that the orange part, which is the town request, has grown more than 1.2%.
Yes.
Right.
It's important to understand, right? The all funds is 1.2. It's just the shifting and, right, okay.
Exactly.
In the funding
I
sources.
just feel like we need to we need to underscore this point. So what it will look to some people like a growth of the orange, and we'll get criticism for that orange, for the growth of the orange, is in actuality a total budget growth that's far smaller than that. So this budget book, I'm saying this out loud for my own sake as well as for anyone who could possibly be listening. So I just want to really emphasize that point right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add that I think that it's really important just to highlight that that purple bar you can see, part of that is some other federal grants, but a significant part of the purple bar over the past couple of years has been ESSER, COVID. There was multiple pandemic relief federal funding sources that we received. So there was CVRF before there was ESSER, there was multiple ESSERs. This past year there was ARP, and as it says, this year we have $5.6 million that we're using in one-time federal funds. I would just go back and remind people that if you look at the two left-hand bars, the orange number there was virtually flat from the first bar to the second bar, which has been what has contributed to a whole bunch of catch-up over time and where our budget has grown, but we did not have that town increase in our budget. And so we have been, since that point, really relying on the COVID relief funds, which are in the purple, which are going away. So when you look at that, again, that $5.6 million that's referenced there, and just how we basically had this $5.6 million gap. There's been a 1-year shift of $1 million in costs to the BEEP revolver. That is not sustainable in the long run. That is a 1-year shift of $1 million. And when you basically take the $5.6 million in ESSER, take away that $1 million that we're carrying for BEEP next year, basically the difference there is the $4.5 million deficit. So that's what's going on here.
This is the cliff that we've been talking about for years.
This is the cliff.
It hits in FY24.
Correct.
So all ESSER money is gone. We've not rolled
Correct.
any forward. It's all
Correct.
done.
Yep.
And there's
And
no
that's
more
actually,
coming.
we had hoped earlier in the year when we had been talking about the guidelines, and Linus, I'm sorry to.
No,
Okay.
you're fine.
We'd been, we had hoped, remember, we were talking about the guidelines and earlier in the year at finance, that we'd been hoping we would have some funds to carry forward another year. However, it looks at this point due to, things change. It's a complicated system. It looks like there will be no funds, ESSER funds that are able to be carried over. At this point, it looks like that. We actually updated the guidelines that are in the budget book because we had talked about that as part of our budget driver, some of the things that we're thinking of for revenue drivers. But that's actually a new note that we put in as of this month so that the guidelines reflected not just the information when we voted it in October, but just the latest and greatest as well.
And does the town have ESSER money coming at all? Or is that?
The town has the second round of ARP funding that they're just starting. I believe they had their first meeting last Friday, but I believe they're still very early in planning stages. So anyway, I'm glad we paused here because this is important.
Helen has a question.
Helen, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is really important. I mean, the 1.2% increase is it doesn't make sense that we're only getting that. But in addition, I think one of the things that has happened, and we've talked about this over the years, the town budget's very, very conservatively in the beginning. So we still haven't heard what's coming, and I think you're going to go into that a little later on in your talk, but we haven't heard what's coming from the state, what the town's revised numbers will be, and what the healthcare numbers will be. And all of those will go into hopefully getting some of this down and the town helping us out, possibly with some ARPA funds too, to get to what is basically a maintenance budget and making up for how we were sort of flatlined between 21 and 22. So
that's a good transition to the next slide.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I may have just jumped ahead. Sorry about that.
Nope, you're fine. So thank you all for your questions and your thoughts there. So when we think about, again, in the context of what some of our speakers shared tonight, when we think about the impact of a $4.5 million budget gap at a salary, and I think we said master step 5, is equivalent to 58 FTE out of 829 FTE out of Unit A. And I think we have a slide in here that shows the breakdown of where the majority of our staff sit. And so when you look at that, that's a pretty significant chunk of staff that would be impacted if we were just looking at sort of a flat, just picking a pot. So we're thinking certainly about what efficiencies, what additional efficiencies can we gain? So if we, for example, look at our classroom, current classroom numbers for consolidations, that's certainly an area that we will continue to explore, but I want to keep in mind, for context, as Helen mentioned there, that we are very early in this budgeting process. We're also very early in our own internal processes, for example, for our K registration. Currently, that process is underway. I think it just actually started yesterday or the day before. And so for January and February, that our registration office is dedicated to specifically focusing on kindergarten. And then after March 1, all of the rest of the grades registration opens for all other grades at that time. So again, that's an area that we will be looking for, certainly consolidations. And then we have to start thinking about, again, the broader implications of programs, boutique programs. We heard one of our parents speak about the ECS program that was once here, that a decision was made at a point in time to reduce it. So we have to start thinking about all the other programs that may be implicated in such a budget reduction, or what impact that gap would have on all other programs. And then to the other point that Helen just made, looking at other potential revenues, state aid changes are to be determined. We recognize that Governor Healy will be submitting her budget, and that process will be a little bit elongated for a new governor. Certainly Helen talked about GIC, or the insurance, and other pieces there. And then a possibility of an override, an operating override, that may be forthcoming in May, as well as other sources of revenues. Any questions there? Yes, ma'am.
It's not a question, it's just a statement. Hal Mason suggested actually at the high school that he anticipates 70 to 80 new students, additional students. So enrollment is increasing at the high school. We don't know what it will do yet at the K to 8s, but so that's a different problem. But
and I'll piggyback on that now, and then hopefully say it again later when we get to that slide. But the moment that we hit send on the budget book to you all last week, we did get an update from the planning department, and I need to go through and look through that email to see what impacts they are thinking that the new housing developments are going to have on us as well. So that came after we had submitted the budget book to you all as well. So
just really briefly, is the assumption that will increase the burden on our schools?
Well,
those projections, or
it has the potential to, as Suzanne is saying, for the high school, it has the potential to generate more students there. But before we commit to what that is, I want to look at what they've shared with us very carefully. So when we think about the override, two potential levels that we are contemplating at this point, and again, we're very early in the process. Level one would be supporting our current programming and operations. So in year one, we've estimated that to be 4.5 million, and the out years are, we're working to refine those calculations. And then level two would be level one plus some PSB program enhancements and improvements to the tune of $1.1 million in totality if all of them are taken. But if not, some combination of level one and some things out of level two. So we are estimating for BEEP full day, that would have a $600,000 impact. And I know Dr. Liu's question will be, well, how is that offset by the tuition paying? And that's a question that he's asked before, and we haven't finalized that response, but we're working towards that. Some additional support for student services, about approximately $240,000. Athletic staffing support, approximately $85,000. A requested bus for South Brookline for the high school students, approximately $48,000. And then looking at studying the world language program at the K level and reimagining that, approximately $115,000 for a study to take that on. So those are some of the suggested considerations for looking at this in various levels.
I would just remind people that the South Brookline bus is currently existing and people just have to pay a fee for it. So this is not a new program. It's basically changing the financing structure to not have those students have to pay extra to access.
There'd be
the-
no fee for the.
Correct. It would basically be to eliminate the fee for South Brookline families to access the school bus.
And for level 2, that's the 4.5 million plus 1.1 million.
Plus one,
okay.
yeah. And so again, the goal would be between now and future iterations is as we're going through, as our enrollment, we get better information about where we stand with enrollment projections. And again, we could get a deluge in here and we'd have to make adjustments because of that. So we certainly as a public school have to service the students that we are provided. But we want to make sure that we are being respectful of the very generous funds that the town provides to us and using those in a way that really optimizes services for our students.
But could you explain just a little bit about the override? So an override is for 3 years, correct or no?
The way that it works, if you want me to answer, Linus. Okay.
Well, before you do that, it could be done as a 3-year chunk, or there could be longer periods of time. And so the town administrator would be making a recommendation to the select board, and the select board would then be making the final determination about what happens, but it's the town administrator's recommendation.
So the thing about the override is, once something is, it's basically proposed for, and it could be, for example, 3 years. And basically that's a funding program over 3 years. But what that also implies is a 3-year plan. And so if you were to propose a longer term plan, like 5 years, then you would be also increasing the amount that you're showing to the voters. Now that amount carries forward, whether you have 3 years, it still goes forward past that. You have the opportunity to present a longer term plan, which can be appealing, but then you would also show as a larger dollar amount. So
If we need
there's
5.6 million for the next year, I mean, we're not, what will that do to the override?
I think that this is a conversation that is a little bit premature to totally roll out at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great question, and
I got you.
hang on a little bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll ask this now. So on this slide, Dr. Guillory, did you consider a level 3 as well that looks to fully fund all of your priorities, that looks to consider, for instance, restoring ECS, or looks to expand the Office of Equity to fully tackle our issues with disproportionality or our disparities as measured by MCAS scores and other means? Is there a reason that we stopped at level 2? Are those your very, very top of the top priorities? Or does that comprise your vision of fully funding an excellent education in Brookline?
That's a very complex question.
I think it's an important one, because I think,
very important.
are we saying that level 2 is an excellent education, or level 2 is the bare minimum of priorities that we would put forth to get to that level? Because if we think excellence requires a level 3, then I think that should be part of the conversation.
That's fair.
We need to say what we believe excellence costs in PSB.
I just would, before you answer, Linus, I would just bring us back to the discussion about SIPs earlier and being works in progress and like working up to a muscular ideal. It's not I know it's not a criticism, but just like what is realistic in a 3-year window versus a longer term vision.
I'm coming at this from the perspective of wanting potential override voters to understand that level 2 may or may not be your full vision of excellence across PSB, but rather something that is if my assumption is true, your very top priorities, rather than your fully funded vision of PSB excellence.
And I think part of that also is because what we did was place placeholders, I think, for the strategic planning pieces, right? And that's what I'm hoping to build, not just Linus Guillory's vision for excellence in PSB, but get the town synergy around that through the strategic planning process so that we have room in the out years to deepen the pot with those types of items.
I guess
So-
I'll tell you, this is coming partly from a place of fear that people will think, well, level 2 is excellence. We can do something a little less than excellence with level 1.
I see.
Rather than seeing level 3, which is true excellence, and then compromising towards something that is your top priorities, rather than the bare minimum, which to me is level 1 right now, assuming no other sources of federal funding or any other kind of funding.
Okay. We'll take that one back and flesh it out some more.
That's really good feedback. Thank you, Stephen.
Mhm. So when we look at the FY24 budget requests, here are the major expense categories. So for personnel, and again, this is to contextualize for our viewing audience that personnel make up 87.3% or 87.4% of our budget. So when you look at the next slide, you'll see why on the impact of the override slide, we picked sort of what the largest group or where we have the largest number of staff sitting as for illustrative purposes to show where potential spots could be. But again, we have to look at what the programmatic implications are for our schools as well. And that's the other part, why it's not just a simple numbers go up, we add, numbers go down, we remove the equivalent amount. When we look at supplies and materials, that represents 2.74% of our budget. Contracted services is 8.4%. Other expenses, 0.5%, and then equipment right at 1%. For a grand total again of $131,864,685 budget request. And so when we look at our operating budget by staff classification, we again look at district leadership, school leadership, vice principals and curriculum coordinators, secretarial staff, our teaching staff, our paraprofessionals and custodians. We have looking at 1,247 FTE and a fractional percent. But it's also important to note that 96% of our workforce is unionized. So that also has standardized financial implications there as well. So when we look at the proposed new positions in the FY24 budget, certainly with Driscoll coming online, that's 2 new custodians that I've authorized to go in this budget for an expanded.
I'm sorry. Can I just interrupt to underline that point as well?
Sure.
You just pointed out that 96% of 87% of our budget is unionized, therefore locked in by contracts.
Mhm.
So everything that we're discussing is the rest. Everything that this budget book represents is the rest. But that's outside of we're not able to make changes to that unless we're cutting the
Unless you
size
had
of the work.
layoffs or
Yeah.
something.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And you-
I just wanted to underline that point.
So 2 new custodians for the renovated Driscoll School, and then new positions that contemplating, as I've been sharing with you all as part of my goals this year, is to restructure the A&F office and possibly looking at the data office for restructuring. So what I'd be looking to do is new positions resulting from restructuring would be funded within the existing resources, and I use the finance office as an example there, where we have current vacancies, looking at position redefinement, realignment for better service to the district, as an example. So when we get into the FY24 budget rationale, again, I believe one of our speakers shared that or interpreted carefully that our budget is a maintenance budget that we're putting forward at this point. But it reflects our current staffing and classroom configurations. We're going to continue to support the social, emotional, and academic needs of our students. And I think you hear that as a growing theme. And any of our school workforce, our work teams will share that as a high priority. Looking at stability and diversity of our community and workforce, that's important to us. And we're certainly going to be looking at more typical class sizes. This was as part of our budget guidelines for this year. For K through 2, the guidelines are 22 students, and grades 3 through 8 will be pushing back to that 25 student. We're going to consolidate where appropriate and recognize that wild shifts in classroom changes also destabilizes our building operations. And so that's, while it's a challenge, it's certainly under financial constraints, we also have to recognize that as an opportunity as well. For our enrollment projections, on the low point, we are projecting just north of 7,000 students, and for a midpoint, we are looking at approximately 7,200 students. And if we look at sort of what's been happening with our enrollment since pandemic, we were nearly at one point, our high point in January of 2020 was just shy of 8,000 students. In January of 21, we were at 6,800 students, and then January of 22, we're at 7,000 students, and this January of 23, we're at 7,072 students. Again, and our budget is to ensure that we are delivering an education that's in alignment with our expectations and core values. So when we look at the new, what we'll call version 2 of our budget book, it builds on many of the changes that were recommended in FY23 in the FY23 budget book, bringing back timely, highly structured presentations on budget information, budgetary information, reflecting feedback from the community, as well as input or suggestions that were given over last year's budgeting process. And our plan is to update the budget book throughout the process. As I've been listening to various members on various committees, it's very apparent to me that folks are getting sort of what I would call point-in-time information, and that information continues to evolve throughout the budgeting process, and people may be remembering a particular piece of information. And so we want to make sure that we are continuously updating our budget book and that we actually produce a final budget book this year so that we can say this is what was voted and approved once we get our final approval through town meeting, so that everyone understands where we are. And we are continuing to align our PSB chart of accounts with DESE aligned, or DESE guidelines. And so that's extremely important as well. And when we look at the various sections of our budget book, I already know what version 2.1 is going to do. I have some thoughts already there. But section 3 is the letter from the superintendent and school committee chair with an overview. Lots of pertinent information, I think, is packed into that 2 pages. The budget overview is similar, but more detailed to the information that's been shared tonight. Sections 5 through 8 are the details by school. Teaching and learning is section 6. Student services is section 7, and the departments is section 8. Section 9 represents FY 24 through 29 capital improvement plan. Section 10 is the different district information, including enrollment forecast, and we'll continue to refine that information as well. Section 11 is school and program information, non-budgetary. And finally, section 12 is our grants and revolving fund information. And again, right now, our budget book exists in a digital format. Certainly heard the feedback, I think, at town meeting about the over-reliance on paper and print materials, and then how to even make these documents printer-friendly and economical and such. Oh, I forgot to say about the timeline. That we will, how do I stop sharing? We will.
Don't stop sharing it. I want.
Don't stop sharing.
Yeah, don't
Hold
stop
on.
sharing it. Before you get to the timeline, can I just make a couple
Sure.
comments on this? I just want to say, in addition to the thanks you said earlier, what a huge lift this was from the whole finance team plus Mike Chan in pulling this together this year, especially without a full-time deputy superintendent. The book is really great, in my opinion, and I'm very grateful for how seriously the finance team took all the feedback that came from the subcommittee as well, to really help produce a book that got a lot of information. I love that we have a 6-year capital improvements plan now in the book, which is really valuable, I think, with descriptions, and I think will really help us talk about that. I love that we have all funds budget so that we can talk about our town request, but also contextualize it within the entire universe of what PSB is doing, because it's really important. And as we talked about in that one slide, looking at that all funds budget, you get a much better understanding of what's going on at PSB beyond just the town request, because it's a much larger ecosystem than that, and it's really important. And I just want to say, I'm thrilled by a whole bunch of this. One thing, Suzanne, if you look in section 5, I think you asked the principals earlier about if they had money, discretionary money, and actually if you go to each one of their school budgets, each one has, each program, each school has a budget where they talk about their accomplishments in the fiscal year to date, their plans for their budget, and any sort of details of their, why they're asking for what they're asking for. And so you can actually see by each school what they have for their, I'll say it's discretionary money, but it's, as they said, a mix of funds for professional development and for, some of these, exactly, materials for some of these in-school programs. And it's really great to see this level of detail. It's very clearly presented. And I'm so impressed that the team was able to get this delivered in this way. So thank you.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, are we moving on to questions yet, or is the presentation still going on?
This is it.
We're still in compliments only, Andy.
Compliments only. Okay, I was going to move on to an actual question. Yeah, the question was, would you mind walking us through the algorithm that you use to get from enrollment forecasts to FTEs, starting with sort of which enrollment forecast of the maybe 3 possible ones you used, and then how granular did you get in trying to figure out exactly how many sections would be needed at each school?
So what we've essentially done is we've taken what we currently have and rolled it forward, recognizing what capacity we have in the organization right now. So we get really deeper into the actual projections once we get through the registration process. So I'm anticipating that information to come out of the hopper more succinctly and much tighter, probably mid-March, early April. As you heard the high school team say that they start their registration process, their course request process, that typically starts in February, that time frame, February to March. So what's interesting is that many of our town processes run at a much faster pace than what our actual school schedules or our internal processes. So we're running sort of simultaneous tracks all along in here. And I also had a conversation with the town administrator about this, because we start budgeting and planning for the budget. Really, it's an all year-round process, but we really start getting hot and heavy into requests in the September, October, November timeframe. And we've essentially built our number by the time they come up with a number that they're given to us. So that's a misalignment. So that's baked into our sort of our separate tracks that we're running. So he and I are going to do some thinking about that. But in terms of the algorithm for the projections, what we did was we looked at some historical trends, sort of where our average growth year over year has been, what has that looked like back almost to the 2010 school year. And we looked at the cohort survival model, which simply rolls our students forward, and we applied a 2% fraction to that. And then we looked at sort of where our kindergarten registrations have been historically as well, and did an average of those to make a projection at this moment. But that gets more refined as the process gets deeper.
And so that projection, if I understood you right before, it was not actually fed into this budget book in terms of FTEs. Like you're simply carrying forward all and only the sections that exist right now.
Right now, yeah.
Okay.
And so again, I recognize that that's heavier, but I'm also somewhat glad that we did it at this moment based on the information that I received from the town department that I need to look at more carefully as well.
Do you want to, is it possible, Linus, just to roll it back to the budget rationale slide, just because I think that speaks to some of these questions. I think it's slide 23. Or I don't know which slide it is. Okay. I guess it's changed. But just to highlight the projections, interesting that right now we're at 7,072 students, which just coincidentally is the low range. It's a complete coincidence. So, and then the midpoint you can see, Andy, is about 120 students above that.
So we started also looking at our October 1 post-pandemic. The first year we gained about 30 students. Then it went up another fractional amount. And then this year, I think we went up about 100, maybe 120 students or so. So looking at then what's our anticipated growth for this school year, which would put us around that midpoint of for FY24, would put us around that midpoint of 7,200, barring any other wide scale disruptions.
Nancy?
I just want to say this was an incredibly Herculean feat. So as long as we're in the compliments part of this presentation, I just wanted to say thank you. Understanding all of the heart, how understaffed you are. This was an enormously heavy lift. This is one of the most transparent, well-written budgets that I hope that this answers many questions for many, many people. And I just wanted to say thank you. This is awesome. It's awesome.
Stephen?
I just want to follow up on what Andy was saying, or I think I'm following up on it. So you can probably tell from all my comments so far that I'm eager to defend a budget that promotes an excellent vision of PSB. At the same time, I'm also really interested in learning more about how you're going about identifying potential efficiencies. So I took Andy's question as preamble, I thought, to what would be a follow-up question, which would be how do those projections help identify potential areas for consolidation, either of space or anything else? Are there areas that you could talk about now that you've started to look into, or that you think you'll be able to look further into, that you think will be more likely to yield efficiencies?
Absolutely. So at the classroom level, again, and I don't want the classroom teachers to feel that I'm picking on them, but I had the conversation with school principals and saying that if we're looking at, for example, a grade level that currently has seats open that meet or exceed the guideline for that particular grade level, that's an FTE savings that can be realized as such. As an example, well, I won't call that school out because I don't want to feel that I'm picking on them, but that's the type of thing that we're going to look at, sort of what are the trends, and that's what's hard right now, especially with real estate prices being what they are. It's hard to really predict, and I've worked in a number of systems, and everybody is looking into the crystal ball around enrollment, because we'd like to be able to look into the future and say, this is exactly what we need for this. But what I would like to do is sort of the conversation that we had around our revolving accounts and what's a healthy reserve. What's a healthy reserve where we have capacity to absorb or take on new students without generating the need for adding FTE, so that we're not carrying an excess amount as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. I think similarly, the superintendent up in Lexington a couple weeks back put out a tweet that she, at this point in the year, had, I think it was 26 additional FTE for special education alone that wasn't budgeted in her FY23 budget because of these shifts. And that 26 FTE was generated by 53 students. So it doesn't take much to cause some wide-scale shifts here. But our commitment, my commitment, is to look at where we have excess capacity in the system as we move through, because again, I don't expect the town just to say, here's $4.5 million because you asked for it. But we also want to make sure that we are being great fiscal stewards of the resources and utilizing them wisely. And so, so more to come on that, but we will be looking for those types of consolidations as such. And then the other part is looking at where are program implications as well, because the other part of Andy's question is also not just at the classroom level, but then where do we have redundancies in the system as well? And again, not to remove all redundancies, but when we have folks that are tripping over each other doing the same or similar work, we have to also look at that, because again, when we just add, those prices grow exponentially, but then what are we reviewing to say we need to remove also as well? And that's just as hard. It's easy to say when we have a number like this, but it will be a fight when you start naming particular programs or particular groups to say that we're going to reduce there.
Okay, thank you. And relatedly, what about buildings? Are there ways to look at our leases and find efficiencies with what we have? One thing that came out for me in the Pierce relocation planning discussions was, I guess I was really hopeful going in that we would find ways to use some of our empty space in relocation, but I learned as we heard presentations that there were logistical difficulties that simply made it non-viable for us to use specific spaces. I'm wondering, I don't want to go into this with a similar naive hopefulness. Are there efficiencies to be had with our buildings, do you think?
So I'm going to answer that in a roundabout way.
I'm sorry, do you mean leases or do you mean building operations, any building operations?
I mean any building operations. Can we consolidate any of our use of buildings in ways that can free up other space, either to get out of leases in the longer term or to rent out spaces, or any? This is how I'm thinking.
So one of the things that I'll say, and I'll use Pierce and Baker as examples. Pierce at one time in its high heyday had 900 students in it. So you're talking about a school that was built for 3 sections that was operating with 5 sections across the board. And just because we did it didn't mean that it was optimizing educational opportunities for kids. Same thing with Baker. The team down there said, yeah, people will say Baker was 800, 850, almost 900 students, but we were cramming kids or educating them or teaching them in spaces that were less than ideal. And it's not to minimize that work that folks did, because they did hard work and great work. So that's one aspect of it, but we'll certainly look at where we might have capacity. And again, that's the great thing about educators is you give them space, they'll use it. And so to then go back and claw back that space is a process in and of itself as well. But we are thinking about that, certainly around our lease spaces. Interestingly enough, in South Brookline, at the Putnam location, we're keeping our eye out for additional space there just in case we might need it. Because if Baker gets hit hard by the Hancock Village location there, we do need space. And there may be some options for us to rent more space at the Temple just because it's available to us, and we may be able to shift more resources over there to free up space in the building. So we are examining that in the process as well, because we do have some real crunches that are coming up once we come out of Clark Road. Those additional BEEP classrooms that are going to remain there need a home, as well as the BEEP staff that are there. So all of those things are on our radar as well.
I just wanted to follow up on something that Stephen was addressing, and in your answer, you mentioned that you are always looking to find efficiencies. So when we talk about a maintenance budget, I want to make sure the public understands that doesn't mean that we're just blindly rolling everything along into the next year without touching any of it. There's always constant adjustments. There's always a very deep look into every program, into every line item, and into every possible efficiency. So by maintenance budget, what we really mean is at the macro level, not every little detail.
Right. That's a great point.
This one, maintaining it, it's talking about continued investment. Maintenance here talks about continued investment in curriculum and materials, right? There's a whole bunch there, which, to your point, maintenance isn't staying still. It's continued movement like we have been doing. It's not a flat budget either, right? But it's
Right,
not,
so those-
it's not launching large new initiatives, right? It's
Right, but we're
for
continuing the
example, if
ones
we have
that we
funds for
started.
program reviews. We are continuing new program reviews because that is something that we are, that is something that's still ongoing. But it is not large new initiatives, as you saw broken out for
More costs.
right, modular additional programming or additional support.
Yes. Nancy?
Along those same veins, I'm just a little bit concerned at the concept of scaling FTEs up and down. Again, I know it's not proportionately regarding, when it comes to enrollment, whether or not it's a question of like 18 kids or 22 kids in a class, because I don't particularly think there's anything wrong with 18 kids in a class. I think that that's still, a good sized class. I'm wondering if this strategy is leaning towards that, or are we leaning towards efficiencies by program performance, or both, or is it both, Dr. Guillory?
I think it has to be a combination of both. But the challenge that we're going to run into is, and again, it's not anything that's new to education, but it's sort of the expanding and contracting. So this year, some of our grade levels in some of our schools that were historically 3 sections went down to 2. But that group is now there's a group of 2 that are moving through the organization. So that was a constriction that's moving, but we don't know yet if the grades, in some cases we don't know, well, in the case of kindergarten, we don't know yet whether that's going to be a 2 or a 3. And so then that has an impact on the planning. And K is where we do the most, where the projection can vary the greatest, because we know who the kids are that we have right now. And by and large, our net in and out, it remains pretty consistent with some growth. But Baker right now is the school, the K-8 school, where we've seen the vast majority, I think 50% of our new students that have enrolled this year have been down at Baker. So that's what we're also looking at. And then we're looking at the points where some of our grade levels are at their capacity right now also. So that means that I don't have any available seats in some grade levels at particular schools. And so if I think about Baker, I think it's Baker first grade. that doesn't have any open seats right now. So what happens when another first grader moves in? If I get a first grader down there, or an influx, let's say, of first graders down there, 1 or 2 won't break the bank. But if I start getting 10, 15, 20 more, then that's going to cause a shift.
Do you
an
start
FTE
looking at
shift.
buffer zones for those situations? I mean,
Well, but down there isn't a buffer that's really viable.
yeah.
When you, so it's those types of things. Up in North Brookline, it's you have more options for that. But you know, and we do have buffer zones. I'm not implying that we don't have them with Baker, but if I live in Chestnut Hill and I can walk across the street to Baker, I'm not going to be as inclined to motor up somewhere else.
Like go to Heap, yeah, I understand.
It's just that proximity piece. Baker's sort of the outlier in that case, though.
Yeah, and I also understand, I mean, we are early in the process and I've worked with budgets before and, you know, they are sort of in flux. And like I said, this is a Herculean task. I think this is really great stuff. And thank you. Thanks for doing this.
All right, anyone else? Suzanne?
I just want to mention that we're having public comment on this again, next meeting, right? February 2nd, are we? So anyway, I just,
Yes,
so the public will have an opportunity to speak again about this.
So in years past, we've only had what we called a public hearing on the budget, but recently, and Stephen came up with a suggestion, we have decided to give the public multiple opportunities to speak on our proposed budgets. So today was just a regular public comment opportunity on the budget, but the more formal public hearing is going to be at our meeting on February 2nd, and that's to give members of the community another opportunity to dive into the budget more deeply, because we understand that it was just made available very recently. And also perhaps the discussion this evening at school committee helps inform some of the questions and comments that the public might have at the hearing. There's also the finance subcommittee that meets and discusses budget issues. So there will still be many more opportunities to comment and share your perspectives and visions for the school district with us. So on that note, we'll move into the next agenda item, which is
David, I would just mention now that we have Finance Subcommittee next Thursday, the 26th, 5 to 6:30. So anyone who did want to have another opportunity for public comment in addition to the public hearing could certainly come to that meeting.
Okay.
I wonder also if we might send out a communication to the larger community in advance of that next public comment, just to encourage people to read through the budget book and advocate for the priorities that they think are important. I mean,
Yes.
either to the TMM listserv or to
Good idea.
either
Yeah.
through ordinary channels. Really? Great.
Okay.
Linus, I presume that the
It's in
budget
the-
book will be in your Friday meeting.
Yeah, Friday
too?
communication.
I mean,
right?
Friday, yes.
With the
mess-
link
email,
to the
yeah.
book, yeah.
All right, so let's move now to subcommittee and liaison reports. Helen, capital improvements?
I don't have a report right today. I wasn't able to attend the building commission. I don't know if Val has anything about Driscoll or any other updates. If not, we
Sure.
can just.
I mean, I can do a little bit about Driscoll, Helen. The change orders were approved. The select board met and approved, that was the last hurdle, met and approved on Tuesday. And so that's proceeding. The other piece that the team, just so if anybody wants to actually watch select board, I can get the slides and send them around to you though. JLA, Gilbane and Left Field put together a presentation for an update for select board who hadn't been updated on the project in quite some time. So they advised that we were still on track for mid-September substantial completion, which is great, and that the contingency budgets were extremely healthy for this point in the project. Again, they still have to demolish a school, so there are some unknowns, but for now, the contingency budgets look in really great shape, and look forward to moving into that building hopefully sometime in September, early October.
I think it might be a good idea for the school committee to get an update like that, maybe in a month or so.
Sure.
So that, we are all aware of what's happening since it is our building. I understand the select board doing that, and that's great, but I think it would also be good for us to have that update. So maybe
I will coordinate that. I'll work with David to see if
Perfect.
we can get that on the docket for sometime soon.
Great.
So
Thank
another
you.
capital-related update, and this was mentioned by Dr. Guillory during the superintendent's report. On January 17th, the select board voted unanimously 5-0 to approve the use of the Newbury Academic Building or portions of it for school use during the Pierce project. It is for limited duration. There will be an MOA that is developed between the town administrator and the superintendent to work out the details. All right, next, Suzanne, curriculum.
We met on Tuesday and we went over the course selections that we voted on tonight. So that took up our whole meeting.
Okay. Val, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Yes, so we don't have a January meeting. We're going to be working on the student section of the equity policy and bring it to the committee for a February meeting.
Mariah, finance.
We have, as I mentioned just now, we have a meeting next week, and we'll be doing a Q2 report at that meeting, as well as going over some of the budget updates that, as Linus was alluding to, things are changing in real time. I'm actually thinking, and this is just an update for the finance subcommittee members, I'm rethinking, given that we don't have a full-time deputy superintendent, I'm rethinking the extensive multiple meetings that we have done in the past 2 years to go into deep dives on each one of the subsections of the budget, just because of the challenges of actually having that happen. But I'm reworking the finance calendar right now, and I want to put that on our agenda for our meeting next week to discuss, just to again be realistic and knowing how much is going into the budget this year, knowing about override prep, how we strike that right balance between talking about things versus letting people do things. So that's ongoing, and I'll have more information about that soon. And
Right, Mariah and Dr. Guillory, is there any format that you would like any feedback on the budget book?
I would ask that you email it in, because I have actually a couple notes to myself of stuff that I'm hoping there'll be really easy adds into, and Linus, you already mentioned version 2.1, so that what I was thinking was, we haven't talked about this ourselves yet, but starting a shared document where we put these in and then we triage them. For example, this one could go in this year versus some changes for next year. So
Okay.
yeah, I'd love comments, and that goes for members of the subcommittee, the school committee, the public. As you have thoughts on things, let us know.
Okay.
And then I just want to give an update on the accounts payable. It's actually been, I just was looking back, because of the holidays and travel, I haven't given an update since October 27th. So it's been almost 3 months. In those 3 months, we've had 11 weeks of signatures. 2, there was no signatures because of Thanksgiving and New Year's. Of those 11 weeks, I signed 8 and Andy signed 3. And there was $5,550,296.14 worth of bills to pay over that 3-month period. And I just want to say that in my experience, and Andy, if you have any specific things you want to note, there's only one thing that I want to highlight. It's been very smooth over the past 3 months in my experience. A lot of the same things that we typically see relating to a lot of food services, a lot of just school supplies, some out-of-district tuition payments. The one thing I want to highlight is that last week I signed for payments to our Medicaid reimbursement vendor. And so that was about $30,000 to the Medicaid reimbursement vendor. And I just want to highlight that what they do is they actually do all of the paperwork relating to Medicaid reimbursement for the services that we provide as part of the Office of Student Services. And so they do all the paperwork and they collect 4% of the receipts. So what that means is that for $30,000, they put together $750,000 that's already been paid to the town of Brookline. That goes into the general fund, doesn't go directly back to the schools, it goes into the general fund for the town. And so I just want to highlight that, as I did last year, I think it's important for people to realize that this is something that the schools pays for, but that also returns to the general fund to then be reused for other town and school purposes. But it then just goes into that pool of funds.
Why does it go to the general fund and not to the school department?
Helen, I think you asked that question last year too. Because it goes to the, because it's a general revenue, it goes into the general revenues pool. It just, I don't have an answer to that question other than that it gets written back to the town. So that's, yep, that's all I wanted to add. I think it's very important for people to understand that that small investment reaps a large reward. Andy, do you have anything else to add to it? No. Okay. So that's all my whole report. Thank you, David.
Mariah, can I just ask Mariah something?
Sure.
Have we had an update for this year? I mean, I've just suffered from trauma from previous years when every meeting it said, we're not going to make our numbers for this current year.
Oh yeah, we did. We had our Q1 report and we were actually running below budget at that point. Due to, I can't remember the exact amount. It was around 600,000, I think, relating to out-of-district tuitions that were less than forecast.
So Q2 ended.
Q2 ended December 31st. Staff was very busy preparing the budget.
Sure.
So we will hear that report at our meeting next week on January 26th. So yeah, we're only about 3 weeks behind when the quarter closed, and then you'll hear the next
That's
report.
fine.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Andy, negotiations?
Yeah, we're looking forward to sitting down with the BEU to start negotiating the para contract for 2023 to 26. We'd offered the BEU some dates in February, and they were able to make it for one of them. So our first bargaining session will be on February 28th.
All right. For policy, the policy subcommittee will be convening on January 23rd, so this Monday. Some topics of discussion will be the physical education and athletics policies, substance use and prevention policy, and discussion of creation of a sustainability task force. All three of these agenda items are in response to significant community input, as well as input from our athletics department, which would like for us to have a review of related policies. So we're queuing that up right away on the 23rd. Any additional liaison updates? Seeing none, that brings us to new business, and I do have some new business to share. I am sadly going to inform the community that Jennifer Monopoly, who has been on school committee since 2018, resigned, and she resigned officially earlier today. We are most certainly going to miss her. She was a very zealous advocate for our students and for public education. She did a superb job as chair of the curriculum subcommittee in particular. Does anyone else have any thoughts that they'd like to share? Stephen?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think she was an exemplar as a school committee member with integrity who refused to vote on any issue unless she had fully thought through it herself. And I really admired that about her and continue to admire that about her as she's still with us. So I'll miss sitting alongside her on this committee.
Anyone else? Nancy?
I echo Stephen's statements, and I think that she made school committee better. I think that her representation and her opinion and her perspective as a teacher was such a valuable contribution to Brookline School Committee. And I really hope that wherever she's continuing to go, that I wish her the best. I just wish her the very, very best. And I will miss her sincerely.
Helen?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Nancy said. I think she brought the teacher's perspective to the committee that was really invaluable. And I too will miss her, and I'll miss her big heart, that she displayed all the time in terms of everything that would happen at the school committee.
All right, so on that note, I'm going to move that we meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there any foreshadowing you could give to the community of when they could expect any next steps around the unexpected open seat?
Yes, so legally, we are going to need to fill the vacancy that has just been created. I believe that we have a 1-month period to work out the logistics around that process. Ultimately, what will happen is there will be a joint select board school committee vote on who the replacement would be. There will be an application process by which any Brookline voter, resident, is able to essentially apply for the position. There will be opportunities for them to come before the school committee as well as a select board in order to essentially deliver their pitch to us about why we should select them. Then at the May election, there will be 4 available seats instead of the usual 3. 3 of those will be for 3-year terms, and 1 of them will be for the 1 year that was remaining on Jennifer's term.
So the person who would fill the seat as interim would essentially have a 3-month role.
Yes, it would be about a 3-month stint.
Thank you.
All right, so now going back to the motion for executive session, I move that we meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purposes. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Brookline Educators Union, BEU Unit A grievance. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining and litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the BEU paraprofessionals. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining and litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. And purpose 7, to review and approve executive session minutes from the January 5th, 2023 meetings. There are seconds. Thank you, Andy. Helen, your vote?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. We will not be returning to open session. So good night to those of you in the public.